this one guy actually takes his belt off and starts wrapping it around his fist like he's going to give himself leather knuckles or
Oh
something.
God,
And
yeah.
Ryan just looks at him and goes, "Really?"
Yeah,
Really?
exactly. Like,
And the guy's like, and puts his belt back on. Like, come on, man. Don't even pretend that you're going to do something with that belt around your fist. It was so pathetic. And then that basically, that sort of the idiocy of that act diffused the whole thing. Like, everyone went off back to the bar and back to drinking. And it was a fight over a woman of some nature. Or
wasn't it always like the stupidest thing ever?
oh
Like,
my God.
and what was the other thing as well? I have people jumping over. Hello, everybody, over on Instagram. Sorry if I'm a bit slow replying to everyone following over on Instagram there. And happy St. Patrick's Day there as well.
Yeah, happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Sarah, welcome.
Somebody's asking over on Instagram, who was the best Irish medieval king?
Jesus.
I would say, I don't know if you've gone into researching the High Kings of Ireland, but I would say, in my opinion, because Rachel specializes in clothing, so you wouldn't spend too much time reading about High Kings and stuff. Maybe you have a favorite in the Desmond Fitzgeralds or something. But my favorite would be definitely, I like Flange Shinna. Flange Shinna right now is definitely one of my favorites. What's that, Rachel?
Well, best is not the same as your favorite.
Yeah.
Right. So a good king, a best king, is not the same as a favorite king. Most of my favorite figures in history are I kind of hate love. Like, they're not good people. They were terrible people, but they're so fascinating that they're my favorites in terms of what I enjoy reading about. But would I want them to rule over me? No.
Yeah, that's true. Especially when they keep robbing your cattle. It's like you look out to the field. You wake up one morning, look out in the field, and all the cows are missing. You know it's Flange Shinna out again robbing them. Like, I would definitely say Rachel's so far. If you were to say a favorite, not best, I would say so far your favorite would definitely be one of the Desmond Fitzgeralds.
Yeah,
especially when they get branded as King all but in name around 1490. Of Henry II during the Wars of the Roses in Ireland. There's kind of a stalemate between the Tudors and the Fitzgeralds because the Fitzgeralds had supported Yorkists during the Wars of the Roses, and the Fitzgeralds end up taking over Ireland and the Irish Parliament. But at the same time, the Tudors end up winning the Wars of the Roses over in England. So the Fitzgeralds invade England in the last battle. A lot of people forget about this one, but the last battle in the Wars of the Roses was actually the Irish versus the English-ish. It's a bit complicated.
Yeah, I mean, what counts as the last battle, actually? But yeah. It's a lot later than people think it is.
Yeah. Right? Because the last battle was
You're talking about the Battle of Stoke? Yeah, Battle of Stoke.
That was led by the Fitzgeralds. The Fitzgeralds led that one by the Irish Parliament against the Tudors. They had, I keep forgetting his bloody name, and I always get mixed up between himself and the other one as well. They crown a young boy as King of Dublin, and they plan on making him King of England because he was, related to Warwick and all of them. So he had better rights, according to us, to becoming King of England. But of course, the English completely deny it. They're just like, oh, he was a pretender. He was fake. No, he was real. He was the real proper king. Go on.
He was, but, here's the thing. People always say things like, well, Richard III was not the legitimate King of England. And I'm like, did he have a coronation? Then he was the legitimate King of England. It's like, this whole nonsense of, well, he wasn't in line for the throne or he was illegitimate or whatever. And like, that's not how medieval kingship is determined as being legitimate or not. Did you get a crown on your head? Were you acknowledged in the case of England by Parliament? Then you were the legitimate King of England. It's, primogeniture is not the only way that medieval kings come to the throne as legitimate rulers, right? Right of arms, right of might is a very medieval concept in kingship or queenship, depending on who you are. I mean, I think one of my favorite, and again, she's not really a queen, but Grace O'Malley is like one of the most fascinating women in Irish history. I mean, and she's post-medieval, right? She's a contemporary of Elizabeth I.
Yeah.
But still, she's she's fantastic on so many levels. Again, would I necessarily have wanted her to be the High Queen of Ireland in the 16th century? I don't know. She was a little crazy, but maybe good crazy, you
Yeah,
know?
like you have to remember, there was a lot of Irish men that followed her into battle. So for to
Yeah,
have that level of
absolutely.
charisma, and
Yep.
she had multiple. This is okay. So recently this year, Grace O'Malley has gone into a lot of deep academic studies because of the fact that she actually had multiple lovers, and that's seen in Ireland as in the line of concubine. Because in the early medieval period, you would, what is marriage and what isn't marriage was a
Right.
blur during the early medieval period. So
It
they would
was.
have had concubines
Yep.
until the church is kind of like, oh, wait, no, this whole concubine behavior, no, no. You have to have one man, one wife. That is
Yep.
what it is in the Bible. So the Irish
But is
start
it?
to have,
But is it?
yeah, 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 yeah. So the Irish are just like, yeah. So we'll start having lovers, okay? That was just, a little bit
Yeah.
of hanky panky fun in the side. So they start having lovers, which are kind of a blur between the concubine relationship and the love relationship. And so Grace O'Malley, funny enough, had wink, wink lovers
Yeah.
with multiple men. So they're studying herself this year. And then there's another woman, another Irish woman who she's an O'Brien up around somewhere around Bronati. It's not Bronati Castle itself, but she has another castle somewhere around there. And she also has, and this is in the 17th century, by the way, she also has multiple lovers as well. And so they're looking at this kind of stuff and they're like, what's going on here? Also, what's very interesting is at the same time as Grace O'Malley, the Fitzgerald women are bitching about their English husbands because their English husbands are like tyrants. So they're starting to wonder and question, do the Fitzgerald women also have multiple lovers as well? There's no real solid evidence there, but it does make you wonder, why are they trying to keep to their Irish circles and very aggressively negative against their English circles? Because I remember we were talking about this before, like, why do they
Mm,
see their English husbands as tyrants compared to their
right.
Irish husbands? And it could be maybe more of the hippie free love. I don't know, to be
It
honest
could.
with you.
It could be. I mean, as once the Reformation, it could also be a difference. And this is one of those
Mm,
medieval myths you and I try to fight on a regular basis. It could be that the Irish are still Catholic
yeah.
and the English are not. And by Elizabeth's time, it is the Anglican Church.
Mm,
Whereas Henry's Reformed Church wasn't reformed; it was just the Catholic Church in England with the you know with the king as its head. But
mm.
Elizabeth's church is a Reformed church, and
Ah.
those Protestants have really regressive ideas about women in the 16th century. And so
Mm-hmm.
it could also come down to the difference in the way their husbands are viewing women through this new, very misogynist Protestant lens
Oh.
versus the Catholic Church, which has a special place for women.
Mm,
Mary, the mother of God, right? The whole Marian cult, and the cult of Mary is very big in Ireland up until
mm,
relatively recently, honestly. And so I could see that actually plays a big role in the difference in the way that women are perceived,
mm,
overall in a society. So in Ireland, aside from all of the other layers of cultural influence about women and men generally kind of being more equal anyway, you
mm,
have that extra layer of the Irish are Catholic, the English are not anymore.
mm,
So yeah, I could see that playing a big role in how women are treated differently in those two
mm.
societies.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. All right. Some people heading over to Grace O'Malley's castle up around, that's up around the Galway area, isn't it? Because Grace O'Malley dominated around the Galway region where she would constantly commit piracy. Although, in our
Yeah.
last chat, Owen O'Neill reckons Grace O'Malley actually made majority of money from charging people traveling because there was a lot of movement and stuff. And during the medieval period, especially in Ireland, the rivers were the highways in Ireland, not the roads. The roads were very, very boggy in Ireland.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
really funny, actually, because where I'm from in Mallow, the King of England would often grant Desmond Fitzgerald money to fix the roads. And Desmond Fitzgerald wasn't stupid. He knew he'd be at war with the English the following season again. the English didn't know about this, but he knew about this.
Right.
And so when the English would give him money, he would just pocket the money in his pocket. And so when the English army would come marching in to siege his castle in Mallow, they would siege the castle. And because it was so boggy and so muddy, and then eventually, disease started to break out, the English army had to retreat again. And so it was actually more favourable to Fitzgerald to use the rivers in Ireland as a highway rather than fix the roads and give the English an advantage.
Oh, I mean, that's a general truth across medieval Europe.
Mm.
The roads sucked. The rivers were the way to go. So any part of Europe that has navigable rivers, Germany has some serious river highways. That is how goods were transported. So all in medieval Germany, every lord who could afford to would build a castle on the nearest river and put up a toll booth. And you, as a merchant, vessel sailing down the Elbe or the Main or the Rhine or the Mosel, you would have to pay like multiple tolls to be allowed to keep sailing, because everyone knew that the roads sucked. You were probably going to actually face some highwaymen on the roads, but also it was just so much faster to take the river. So everyone talks about traveling by road, but the reality is that there was that ship that river travel was the way to go. So that doesn't surprise me that Ireland is the same thing.
Yeah.
Road maintenance wasn't really for most of the Middle Ages. Not many of the polities actually had the scale of, say, the Roman Empire that you would need to maintain roads really well.
For sure. Happy St. Patrick's Day for everybody who's just jumped into the chat now. Rachel, are you Amish, 19th century?
Oh, God.
You're 15th century, no?
No, yeah. So I'm going to start a new drinking game on all my live streams, Philip. We've decided that in any given live stream, we'll name one thing that is the thing on which everyone must drink a shot of their favorite fermented beverage. And it will be different for every live stream. So maybe for this one, it should be, are you Amish? No.
Because Rachel actually explains what Amish is. Because straight away my brain, because I'm used to Burnmati Castle, which has a lot of living historians and stuff up there. I'm used to seeing this kind of clothing and thinking, oh, that's medieval. But Rachel actually had to explain that in America, you guys have Amish and stuff. I had no clue. Well, I had a small idea what an Amish community was up from the television and stuff, but I had no clue that, that they dress like this and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the Amish are actually they are a population, a community, an insular community of Moravians. So they are basically Swiss Protestants, and it's a sect of Protestantism. Switzerland produced some crazy fucking religious nut jobs in the 16th century. Calvin is among them, by the way. I don't know, something about the air in the mountains led to crazy thoughts. I don't know. But the Moravians were one of these groups, and amongst their as European civilization kind of progressed, as the Industrial Revolution starts picking up, they decide that they need to live a more simple life that harkens back to more the Old Testament way of doing things. And I don't mean the brother marrying all the sisters or something like that. I just mean living a simple life that's modest, that's humble, that eschews modern technology. And eventually, as you can imagine, those communities weren't very welcome in Europe as it was modernizing. So just like all the other nutters who ended up in the US, I'm thinking the Puritans, I'm thinking the Huguenots, I'm thinking the Calvinists, right? What part of the reason America is such a clusterfuck that it is today, thank you all religious nut jobs. The Moravians ended up coming and settling, and at first they settled really heavily in Pennsylvania. So because that was, at that time, that was kind of there weren't as many options on where you could settle in the 18th century. And over time, these Amish communities have actually spread all over the Americas. There are Amish communities in Mexico. There are Amish communities all over the US, wherever there's lots of farmland, basically. And part of technically, they're supposed to traditionally avoid electrical appliances. They're supposed to dress in a very modest fashion. So first off, not Amish. How can you tell I'm not Amish? You can see a lot of skin. Lots of skin. Another way you can tell I'm not Amish, the skirts are really full, lots of fabric, not modest. The color is blue, and it doesn't look so bright in this camera, but trust me, by Amish standards, this is a deeply saturated, not modest, not humble blue. And this style of kerchief is it's not an Amish style of kerchief at all. This is 15th century. Not Amish. So yeah. But the first thing you can tell, the reason you know automatically I'm not Amish, all this skin, salacious by Amish standards. So yeah. But of course, now the Amish communities have modified, shall we say. They now will use solar panels to say keep their smartphones charged, and they have mobile data plans, and they're now using like propane gas lanterns, like camping lanterns, those really bright Coleman style ones. So I will say that the Amish communities are also evolving. They're nowhere near as strict as they used to be about eschewing modern technology. So
it's not too bad. But you're still saying that they're making some of the best like reenactment stuff, like especially woodwork wise and stuff. Because
they are. At least last I checked, the Amish carpenters are some of the best. So yeah, if you are in the United States or Mexico, I guess, and you have access to an Amish community, an Amish carpenter, they are masterful, and they do traditional joinery that is chef's kiss level. So if you have any medieval furnishings you would like to have reproduced, go contract your local Amish carpenter to do it. Show them a picture, you can show them the specs, and they will produce it, and it will be better than any piece of furniture you've ever owned in your life, probably. Amish fetish unlock. So Jim O'Neill mentions the Mennonites. So the Mennonites, I call them Amish light. I grew up in Amish country and I actually had Mennonite neighbors, and I actually went to Bible camp with my little friends. So they still kind of try to live a simple life, but they have fully adopted electricity appliances, and they drive cars, not horse-drawn carriages. So, yeah.
Padraig from House Blackstar.
Oh, Padraig! Hey, my friend, welcome. Padraig is one of my he's one of the members of the SCA whom I know from my 2-week living history event every year at Penzic. Nice. So he's actually on. Patrick, nice to see you. Yeah, everyone mispronounces his name horribly. They pronounce it as phonetically and Englishly as possible. God. Yeah.
How is this supposed to be pronounced?
Padraig, isn't it Patrick?
Padraig.
Isn't it supposed to be like? Isn't it like the Irish version of Patrick? It should just be pronounced. It's not like Padraig. You don't pronounce all those because it's an Irish name.
Right. Gotcha. But where am I going? Oh yeah, Instagram, just telling us we shouldn't be drinking. The old ways are best, says Instagram. Well, you see, myself and Rachel are actually Roman Catholic. So in our faith, during Lent, we are in the middle of Lent, but during St. Patrick's Day, we are actually allowed to eat meat and drink alcohol. Technically speaking, we're not supposed to go out with the intention of abusing alcohol, but we are allowed to have alcohol and drink meat for St. Patrick's Day. And, if, accidents happen with alcohol, oh well.
Right.
Just enjoying ourselves, just having 1 or 2, 10 drinks, who's to say which point, is a safe, space when it comes down to drinking alcohol.
Right. Yeah. But that is the funny thing about, all of these rules, these medieval church rules, right? That govern your behavior, that say, well, on this day, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And by the way, the can't do this was mostly sex. On these days, you were supposed to abstain from sexual intercourse. So that was Wednesdays, Fridays, and that was Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. You were supposed to abstain from sexual intercourse. You were supposed to avoid meat and animal products like butter. But for every set of rules, well, you aren't supposed to do this. There's always these dispensations. Well, but on this particular Wednesday, because it falls here on the calendar and it is a saint's feast, you can do those things. So in this case, on St. Patrick's Day falls in the middle of Lent. The church actually did issue a dispensation that on that day, apparently in for most of the Middle Ages, from what I could find, they were allowed to have their feast, right? They were allowed to celebrate. They were allowed to do the thing. But then the next day, right back to it. Right back to your Lenten fasting.
The old prayers. I am terrible for going to church over Lent. It's mostly because I'm so busy. I don't mind going down on the Sunday. These days, because I'm over in Okinawa, it can be a nightmare trying to get over to the church and stuff, even for prayer and stuff. Most of the time, actually, I have it on the TV. Myself and Yuki put on church on the TV with old Matthew. What was this called? I found out the other day as well. Matthew is one of these characters who just kind of disappears, doesn't he? Have you read up on Matthew?
I haven't. I'm not certain about whom you're speaking, in fact.
Matthew's the one that's if anything happens to the little ones, you put a rock around their neck and you just dump them in the middle of the sea. But he is one of the saints of Jesus, one of the main disciples and stuff.
Wait, did you say, do you mean, oh wait, I'm sorry, you mean Matthew?
Yeah, Matthew. That's what I'm saying, aren't I?
Oh, I heard Matthew.
Oh, yeah,
I heard Matthew because you can't because you're Irish and you suck at pronouncing the thorn.
my pronunciation's great. I don't know what you're saying.
Matthew, yes, okay, Matthew. I do know who Saint Matthew is. Oh my God,
anyway,
that's hysterical.
Saint Matthew, right? So they Saint Matthew's a funny character because they can't confirm how he passed away. And one of, if you're following like the documentations and stuff, he kind of goes off to Ethiopia, and then there's an idea, well, maybe he disappeared or got chopped while he was traveling around and stuff. But he just kind of just disappears from the records compared to the other saints that just have really horrific deaths, because the other saints are constantly poking and prodding the Roman Empire.
Right.
One of which, horrifically is St. Peter, which causes so much argument today because of the fact he was, a lot of people, including ourselves, see him as the main followers of Christ. St. Peter was ended up being crucified upside down. They originally wanted to crucify him just like Jesus, and he was just like, "Oh, I'm not good enough. Crucify me."
Yeah, exactly. I'm not good enough to die like a normal person. Please crucify me the worst way, upside down.
But there was another saint. Maybe you can remember his name. I can't.
Andrew.
Remember. Is it the one that was getting fried? He was getting fried, and he was just like, "Yeah, I'm a bit done on this side. Can you throw me on?"
Oh, you're talking about Saint Lawrence. Saint Lawrence, right? Yeah, Lawrence, that's the patron saint of my family, since my last name is Lorenz in German. Yeah, Saint Lawrence.
Way.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done on this side. Why don't you flip me, boys?
Yeah. What the hell? Oh my God!
That's what we call a real baller, right?
Yeah, right. Like the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church produces the most radical lunatics ever, and it's always funny to me because presidents judge us the most for having saints, and yet it's our saintedom that produces the biggest lunatics. Like.
Well, I mean, there's always, and this is a big debate in the history community, how real were these people? Because most of the stories about their martyrdom are post-mortem. They're posthumous. So we don't necessarily have good, reliable chronicles from the era talking about these things. And it's, obviously, clickbait is nothing new. You and I have talked about this. Chronicles of the Middle Ages, most even chronicles today are clickbait, right? They are designed to make people read them. No one's going to want to read the story about a saint who died a peaceful life. Boring, right? We want to know about the guy who was flayed alive or had his intestines pulled out slowly but still lived through it, or the guy who was roasted, or the guy who was boiled, or the guy who was torn apart by horses. That's interesting. We like to be horrified. Right? No one wants to read about, that saint, he died of old age in his bed, lived surrounded by his followers in peace and harmony. Blah. That's what'll get you a thumbs down on YouTube. So, I always take these stories of martyrdom with a grain of salt, and you have to really be careful about getting to the origin of those stories and figuring out, trying to really determine what's fact and fiction can be a fool's errand. So I try not to assume that all of those stories of martyrs are actually true.
I like it, it depends. It depends because you even have lads that are getting martyred by the Ottoman Empire because by the time you get up to the period you like so much, the 15th century, and you can definitely reconfirm this as well. Between was it the Holy Roman Empire and the Ottoman Empire, the Balkans ends up getting sandwiched between, and so
Yeah.
the radical, executions that are happening are mind blowing to me. Like no matter how bad it is in the 5th century or even the 3rd century and stuff, I find the 15th century in the Balkans is absolutely wild. It's anything.
Much more gruesome, much more
Yeah.
gruesome. But even there, we have to be careful. It's who is writing the history. Is it a Hungarian writing the chronicle? Well, I'm not going to necessarily take everything they say as being 100% accurate. Is it an Ottoman writing the chronicle? Again, the truth is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. But the second a chronicle says something like in one, hundreds of thousands of Ottoman troops swarmed to the city, but God smote them. It's like hundreds of thousands of people wouldn't fit in the space that you're talking about. So that's just not true. Yeah. I always tell people history is not like this clean record of pure objective fact that we wish it were. It's recorded by people, and every single person writing has an agenda. Whether for good or for ill. It's not even a conscious agenda. I don't mean that it's some kind of conspiracy. I just mean that they're writing with an intention to convey a certain event with their own emotion, with their own observations, and that's going to automatically corrupt the record from objectivity to bias. So we have to examine any given event through as many sources as possible. And then the most important part for me is the archaeology. What does the archaeology say? It's archaeology that is showing us that the Battle of Wakefield was probably not a real battle as such. Right? This event that has been touted as one of the great battles, turning points of the Wars of the Roses, turns out it wasn't a battle. There's no archaeological evidence to support that.
That's interesting. All right. We got a ton of questions coming in there. One person's asking, what in the Flying Nun? I'm just assuming that was, no, that actually when I seen it the first time we were talking about flaying, I was like, a flaying nun? No, I'm actually reading it. I was like, what in the Flying Nun? What are you doing, Rachel? What is it you're doing right now?
I am doing something called finger loop braiding now. This would have been lace making in the Middle Ages. I'm making laces for Ryan's new 15th century harness to actually point his armor to his arming garments, because in the 15th century, harness is not really strapped on with straps. It is tied directly to your clothes so that it becomes one with your body and moves with you as though it were built into you. So we need a lot of these, and this is hemp, and it's hemp yarn, and it is really rough, and I already have a blister on one finger from my last bout of finger loop braiding, so I'm confident I'm probably going to have more blisters by the end of today's live stream.
Nasty. Jim O'Neill says in the comment section, there is also a different types of martyrs. Green martyr, martyrs which were still living, red martyrs which are usually the ones that are murdered, and then Jim O'Neill says he can't remember which the white martyrs are. I can't remember what the white martyrs are as well. If anybody in the comment section remembers what the white martyrs are, God, I'd fail that in history class if that question was to pop up for sure. Go on.
Yeah, I don't know either, but there. I mean, yes. That's the other thing. Not all martyrs are created equal, and there are martyrs who are martyred in, and they're deaths were recorded by contemporaries, right? And that's the records there are more likely to reflect reality than when someone is writing 300 years after the fact. And extrapolating or injecting information to fill in the blanks, so that also matters. But, also, when you are trying to create a sense of belonging, a sense of loyalty, a sense of bonding, trauma is a great bond. So when you have these horrifying stories of martyrs from the Roman Empire, and it's also a good way to present Christianity versus paganism bad, Christianity good. Look what the pagans did. The pagan emperors tortured these poor people, these poor innocent people. So that creates a sense of, Christianity good, paganism bad. You don't want nuance there. Like there's one 4th century martyr. Is it Saint Apollonia? It might be Saint Apollonia, but don't hold me to that. I just remember reading the actual history of her martyrdom, and she forces them to martyr her. She goes out into the ring, into the arena, and it says, "I want you to martyr me." And the governor is like, "No, why would we do that?" She was so desperate to become a martyr for Christ that she forced them to martyr her. They weren't going to. They didn't want to. Why would we? What have you done that would deserve this? But she desperately, this is the kind of early fanaticism that we have in the early church. So, she wanted her story to become a story that would inspire people to convert and to move away from their evil pagan ways. So she manipulated the entire narrative to force them to make her a martyr. It's so weird.
Yeah. I'm more into the teachings that Jesus is love as well. To be honest with you, a lot of people in the comment section, when it comes down to my teachings, sometimes actually, this is funny. I was talking to the wife this morning. We were talking about the Old Testament, and we understand 100% why God sent his only son. Because if you read the Old Testament, whoa, I think we got a lot of stuff. I don't think it was God. I don't think it was God getting anything wrong. I just think some of the messages got a bit mixed up. And I think God was just like, okay, I'm sending my son here. My son has to fix everything. Because if you read Jesus, he's bang on. Just love your neighbor, spread the love. So simple.
Don't judge, be kind.
Yeah, right?
Share the wealth, all this hippy dippy socialist shit. Yeah.
So I'd follow more of the teachings of the New Testament and Jesus's love your neighbor and stuff, because looking at the Old Testament, especially to do with David and Solomon, I'm like, okay, maybe not follow some of that stuff.
I mean, the Old Testament is not a guide for behavior. It's a guide on what not to do. It's as much a guide on what not to do as much as it's a guide what to do. I mean, it's yes, there's Deuteronomy and there's Leviticus where you have literally, dozens, if not hundreds of rules that you have to follow in your daily life, technically, plus, of course, the 10 Commandments. But most of the stories are not about this is what you need to emulate. They're about this is what you shouldn't do. They're cautionary tales. Yeah, is what they are.
That's how I felt as well, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Definitely. The lesson from Sodom and Gomorrah is not that you should behave like the people in Sodom and Gomorrah. By the way, their crime was not homosexuality. Their crime was being bad hosts and being bad hosts and also pederasty and pedophilia. That was their crime. Yeah. But that's it. You shouldn't walk away from the tales of Sodom and Gomorrah and go, yeah, I want to model my life on the way those people lived their lives in those cities. That's not the takeaway.
Right, I have to quickly push on before we start going into a wild conversation in the comment section, because God, we can go wild with that one. White martyrs.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. What was that, Philip? Could you repeat that?
Kevin was confirming what we were, well, he was correcting what we were saying there. White martyrs were for labor and fasting. Green martyrs are for people who go into exile, self-exile. And red martyrdom was for murder.
Oh,
Well, being
interesting.
murdered anyway.
That was going to say, I think, yeah, being murdered one would help.
It was the same thing I was saying yesterday about the St. Patrick's thing, about this idea of St. Patrick coming to Ireland with an axe and chopping up the Irish. It's like, I don't have any source for that. If we read the main source itself, the Confessio and .ie, Patrick is always trying to spread the love, you know, the teachings
Yeah.
of Jesus, of I've come here to love you all. And the people in Ireland are just like, that's nice. Okay.
and it's very clear. And actually, there was some evidence I saw that there was already a monastery there before he even arrived on the island. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very clear that Ireland, being as very closely connected to the Roman Empire as it was, wasn't just like, oh, we're completely pagan. Oh, look, here's St. Patrick. We're now Christian. You know, it's obvious there were already Christians living there and spreading the gospels. You know, he's not walking into a blank slate, basically, in that regard. Yeah, that video you produced about basically debunking that horrible AI video about St. Patrick the colonizer. And I'm like, what? Maybe you don't know what the word colonize means, because one person coming over and spreading ideas does not a colonizer make. It's
yeah, that's also bang on true. It's funny as well, you were saying there about Christians already being in Ireland beforehand. What's very strange is there seems to be a very massive high indication, and even the fact that St. Bridget appears very early. People think St. Bridget pops up later. She actually pops up really, really early. And we'll have a talk about this whole thing about two St. Patricks, because you read a recent article as well, which I'd love to talk about. But one of the earliest and the majority of Patrick's early followers were actually women. And academics believe...
Very common, by the way. Early Christianity was super popular with the disenfranchised groups because Jesus's message was one of equality.
Yes.
It was an egalitarian in its earliest understanding. And if you get back to what Jesus actually bloody well said, it's all about we are all equal in the eyes of the Lord. And that was appealing to slaves, obviously, and that was appealing to women. So it does not surprise me in the least that St. Patrick's first followers were women. Maybe first is maybe too strong a word, but that he was majority followers were women.
But they think it's actually equal rights. St. Patrick was preaching for more... rights for women within marriage, because at the time, I don't know about the rest of Europe, you can correct me about the rest of Europe, but allegedly in Ireland, women weren't actually that much in favor of having multiple of concubines and stuff, because if they got pregnant, their child would lose rights within the society, right? So for there to be an heir, that child would have to be inside of a marriage to prove that he is the heir to that land and that cattle, etc., etc., etc. So if a woman got pregnant, herself and her child, because she's no longer, a perfect woman and blah, 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 and has men, she would lose her status within the society. And on top of that, her child may not be recognized. Okay, now that goes into a bit of a complicated debate within the Breton law itself, because bastard children were recognized to a certain degree, etc., etc. But people are arguing right now that marriage would, really legitimize that woman and her child. So they're arguing the majority of Patrick's followers were women who were pregnant to men who were trying to get other women pregnant as well. And they were trying to argue who was the legitimate child. So majority of the women, the very first early women, were basically like the early which is so strange to say, because today we think of feminists, we think of people who were anti-church, but back in the early medieval period, it was the other way around. The majority of these, as we would say today, feminists were actually pro-church, because it would give them better rights in society to be Christian rather than pagan, allegedly.
I mean, possibly one of the worst things to ever happen to Christianity is for it to become the official state religion of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
um, um, just because that then brought with it all of the baggage that was the Roman, and the Roman Empire was very patriarchal, like
Mm,
very patriarchal, despite having all of these very powerful female cults. Like the cult of Isis was massively popular in ancient Rome. The cult of
mm,
Demeter, the cult of, the cult of Aphrodite, right? These are all powerful women, goddesses. But
mm,
somehow that didn't translate to women being respected and treated as equals in the eye of the law, which is
mm,
fascinating, this fascinating dichotomy. So, in under Roman law, women were property, and I mean all women. I'm not talking about slavery. Let's not even get into slavery.
mm,
Women were the property of their fathers, they were the property of their brothers, they were the property of their husbands.
mm,
So that's one of the reasons Christianity spread like gangbusters amongst
mm,
Romans, because that message that no, you are not property, you are equal in the eyes of God.
mm.
And then, of course, to find men who believed similar things, Christian men, in this growing early Christian church, was really appealing to no longer
Yeah.
be viewed as just chattel.
Mm,
So, yeah, a big shift. And, Patrick was probably, I suspect, even though it's kind of hard to know, we
mm.
don't exactly have the best records from the
Yeah.
fifth century. You know, I suspect, my feeling is that he is probably part of the more true to Christ's message church and not so
Yeah.
much to the state Roman religion church,
Mm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because it was considered insular. Today, when we're talking
Yeah.
about Christian ideas inside of Ireland, we refer to it as, from an academic interpretation, insular Christianity, and then
Mm-hmm.
online we call it Celtic Christianity.
Right.
So we do have a different interpretations. Online, if you want to read St. Patrick's letters, by the way, it's confessio.ie. Okay, so if you want to read legitimately what St. Patrick actually said, you can go on to confessio.ie, where St. Patrick has two letters. He has one called the letter to Coroticus, where he's basically telling him to release these Irish prisoners that had been captured by this warlord,
Right.
allegedly in Britain. And the second one is who, by the way, who were his followers. He says, like, oh, please give me back my followers. They haven't done any harm, etc., etc., etc. And then it's a big long letter as well, which is very interesting. And the other one is the Confessio, which has us all, like, there's so much writing into it, and it gives us such a good view on 5th century Ireland. But at the same time, it doesn't, because we don't know what St. Patrick is apologizing about. He doesn't elaborate on where he is. He doesn't.
Right.
So he gives us like this deep, theology, from a religious perspective, this deep, view of the Christian church in Ireland. But at the same time, he doesn't like conclude stuff. He doesn't say, well, I'm hanging out with the O'Neills here with this High King of Ireland, and these boats look like this, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But he gives us this constant like keyhole view into the world, so we can't quite see what the whole picture is like, but we get these
Yeah.
little ideas that let our imagination go wild. But there's no solid conclusions in there, which is so frustrating to read. So I definitely would say
Yeah.
go over to the confessio.ie and have a look at the confessio letter, because God, it will frustrate you afterwards, because it's like, oh,
What
this is great, but go on.
what is the dating? So the letters that have survived,
Mm,
the original, do you know if to when those date? Because here's what I know about medieval documents in general.
yeah.
Very often what has survived are copies of the
Yes.
original, right?
Mm,
And so very rarely do we actually have the original document, say, written by Charlemagne. We have a
yeah.
copy from the 11th century or
Yeah.
something like that. So are you familiar with the historiography of the Confessio? Is it
So
is
the
it a copy of an
surviving one of
original or
the surviving one of the two letters that we do have is a copy from the 9th century. That's
right?
inside of the Annals of Ulster. Okay, so if who's it?
Ah,
Yes,
got
it's
it.
the Annals of Ulster. So it's either the Annals of Ulster or the Book of Armagh. It's one or the other. But it is a hand copy of both the Confessio and the what's it called? The Confessio and the letter to Coroticus. And
Right.
the styling, and you see, as you said there are some people that went, because it's written in the 9th century, it can't be real. But then there's people who are saying, well, it's still written in the style of the 5th century, as in, the way
Linguistically, you mean?
yes, yeah. That's exactly what I mean. So a lot of people, and this is why I do think it's a good, full-on copy of the original, because it's a copy from the 5th century. Like, how would somebody from the 9th century know exactly how to write from the 5th century?
Yeah,
So,
that would be very unusual. So most people don't realize that language evolves.
Yes.
And that Latin also evolved massively. So, in the 5th century, you're at the end of antiquity. You've got a kind of classical Latin that's still being used. It sticks much more closely to classical Latin grammatical rules, declensions and conjugations and all that. But by the 9th century, the Latin has gotten a little more loosey-goosey. So someone who's an expert in Latin, the history of Latin, would absolutely be able to tell, well, this is either a really genius imitation of 5th century Latin, or it is in fact 5th century Latin. So that is, for me, that is actually good evidence for it being a genuine copy, or a copy of a genuine original, rather than a 9th century forgery, for instance.
Yeah. Susan just saying that St. Patrick was a part of the Romanized British Christian church at the time. Yeah, that's true. He was originally, but it seems to us, well, me anyway, that he seems to have adapted. So when he came into Ireland, he adapted to the pagan ways in Ireland to try to bring them across. One of the best examples is the way that St. Bridget had gone from being a goddess into being a abbess, perhaps, and then later on became a saint. I do believe that there was an abbess that was called Saint Bridget, but if you to use my feelings, I do believe there was a goddess beforehand called either Bridget or Burgundies, because of the fact that they were already worshipping a goddess in the north of Britain, who was kind of Celtic Romanized, who was called Burgundies. So I do believe that in Kildare, because it's in the same, like if you were to jump on a boat, it would take you about an hour to get from York over to Dublin. And then right next to Dublin is Kildare, where St. Bridget was hanging out.
Okay, hold on a minute, Philip. We have some people who think we're either AI. I'm not AI, everyone. I've got real blisters on my ring finger that's probably about to burst and start leaking everywhere. Also, we are not pre-recorded. But here's the thing, guys. If we constantly stop and respond to the live chat questions and comments, we'll never actually get to put any good information out there. So the general format is that we'll talk about a topic for a little while, and then we'll take a moment when we reach a natural breaking point. We'll take a moment to address the questions. So I would suggest that if you have questions that you would like us to address, wait until we take that break to put them in the live stream. Yeah. Okay. Continue, Philip, please.
So, because there is that link between Saint Burgundies, no, not Saint Burgundies, the goddess Burgundies, the Celtic Burgundies in the north of England, and Saint Bridget, that's in Ireland. They think originally she was a goddess, and then when Saint Patrick comes around, he Christianizes the place. But what's interesting is that most likely there was a priestess there, or Judas, who converted to Christianity, and then she happened to be called Bridget at the time as well. So I personally do believe that there was a Bridget there, especially when you have stories around abortion and other very touchy subjects, which are written later on from like the 9th century and the 10th century onwards. And that's why there's a debate, was Bridget a real person? Was she a goddess? Was she made up? Because her stories don't pop up until like the 9th, 10th century, way up into the Viking age. So it's a huge debate today. You were saying something earlier as well about, at the same time when there's the St. Bridget kicking about, that there may have been a second St. Patrick. What's the story with that? Because the comment section now are talking about the second St. Bridget as well. Yeah,
the tale of two Patricks, right? It's the tale. It's a very. If one were to look it up, tale of two Patricks. Don't listen to anything AI results have to tell you. Everyone, ditch your chat GPT, ditch the AI search results. Please look past it to actual vetted peer-reviewed journals and whatnot, because the AI, chat GPT, Grok, they're all going to give you wrong information. So the two St. Patricks, there seem to have been about, and actually this is weird, this comes back to the 1940s. A historian, an English historian writing in the 1940s, published this paper that actually pointed out that there were in fact two St. Patricks from roughly the same time. And so one of the theories is that, well, then that triggered a counter response, which was, well, there were no St. Patricks at all. It's all just made up. So there's actually this debate. Was there one Patrick? Were there two Patricks? Were there zero Patricks? But the theory about the two Patricks is that you have this man whose Latin name was Palladius, and that he went to Ireland and was spreading the gospel. And then the second St. Patrick, the one that we are currently celebrating today, he arrived in Ireland, came back to Ireland after, freeing himself from slavery, et cetera, et cetera. And the theory is that they actually connected, and that St. Palladius, St. Patrick I, was acted as a sort of mentor for St. Patrick II. And the St. Patrick I, Palladius, his feast day was celebrated in July. Okay. July 6th or July 7th. So that's the theory I read, that there were in fact two Patricks, and there is some reasonable documentation for that. It's very interesting, but it's also very, very the way that it's been documented is complex. So I really do recommend just going and reading the whole paper. Okay. But this is why history can be challenging when a lot of people have the same name.
Yeah, and it's so common as well, especially with the likes of John and Patrick, and another freaking good example we were just talking about. But you can see the same thing with the Fitzgeralds as well. Endless amount of Morris Fitzgeralds. Like you'll have literally the Lord of Kildare, Morris Fitzgerald, the Lord of Desmond, Morris Fitzgerald, at the same time, by the way. So it can be wild.
Ryan. Ryan was a captain the commander of a unit here in Korea, and in his unit they had three Sergeants Jimenez. Three different sergeants, all with the last name Jimenez. So, when you looked at the org chart for the unit, it's very important for you to learn, the names and faces of your commanders. Here's Sergeant Jimenez and Sergeant Jimenez and Sergeant Jimenez. It's like, Jesus Christ. They all have the same name. How are we supposed to? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's just take a moment. We had a question in there that was a good one. And it was this one was a while ago. We keep using this word medieval. Oh, thank you, Ralph. That's super nice of you. Really appreciate that super chat.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate that. Medieval, the word medieval, we say medieval, but it's not spelt that way. It's spelt medieval. Do you know what the word actually means?
No. Go on. I haven't heard this before.
Really? Come on, Ben. You're Irish medieval history. Okay, so eval is it's a Latin word, right? It's a Latinate word. Eval means age. Yeah. Medi means middle. So it literally is the Latinate word for middle age, and it is the age between the Roman Empire, antiquity, basically, and the modern world. So the word medieval, which in English we lazily pronounce medieval, it's not evil. It's got nothing to do with evilness or an evil nature or the evil dark ages. It literally just means the age between antiquity and the modern world. So that's all medieval means, everyone, just to clarify that.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. I was going to bloody say something and it's gone completely out of my head. I know you were talking about, just before we came on, about everybody and their kilts. I remember the original argument kicked off when people were having Highlander, the Highlands festivals and stuff over in the Scottish Americans. And now this morning with St. Patrick's Day Ireland and Jesus. America, Irish and Irish Americans were arguing about the kilt.
Yes.
And personally, because I grew up in the reenactment scene, I always knew that we had lenas, which translates to tunic for anyone who knows, during the medieval period. And then around the 19th century, there was a switch into the kilt. I'm
Yeah.
right in saying that, aren't I,
Oh,
Rachel?
you are. You are. Kilts. I hate to, God, I have so many people trying to school me on this. People from Scotland, too, who think because they have a Scottish birth certificate, it means they know everything about their own fashion history. Got news
Yeah.
for you. It doesn't. Yeah, the kilt, what everyone understands of now as a kilt. First off, okay, you're living history. You're a reenactor, so that's not a fair question. But pretend for a moment you were a modern person without a reenactment background.
Yeah.
What would you, when someone says kilt in the modern world, what does that generally mean?
The kilts in the modern world, the short kind of, it looks like a skirt, like, and
Say
it's meant
it.
to be
Say it.
placed.
Yeah, say it.
Yeah,
It's a
mini
skirt.
skirt. Like, some people look at it as a mini skirt when it's not supposed to be a mini skirt, you know.
Right. Yeah. So it's a skirt that is pleated, right?
Yeah.
And what is the pattern going to be in general, Philip, on a kilt?
The pattern? Are you talking about the plaid? What was it? The plaids? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the tartans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a garment that doesn't come into existence in Scotland anyway until the 18th century, and
Yes.
it doesn't get adopted in Ireland until the 19th century as part of the nationalist movement, right? Because the Irish are like, well, we need to have a traditional costume like everyone else now in Europe has, so we can set ourselves apart from the English. But instead of going to their own historical garments, which could be different enough, they decide, well, our Scottish brethren have kilts, we'll have kilts too. So now on St. Patrick's Day, you have all these Americans, running around in their modern kilts, usually in some pretty hideous colors. And I mean, like hunter orange, hunter yellow. I've seen some pretty scary ones. And they think that they're being traditional Irish, but they're not, are they? It's not, I mean, they think they're part of this medieval tradition of fashion, but it's not. It just isn't.
There is a certain level of connection, but you'd have to understand. I think people need to learn the connection of development, because that's what history is. History is learning the development of how we had Lena tunics or even cloaks during the medieval period, and how that develops from around the 13th or even further back to 10th century. And studying the development of that from the 10th century, from the early medieval period, and then going all the way up to the 19th century and seeing how that kilt developed. I think that's important to study. People shouldn't be turning around and saying, this is exactly how it looked during the medieval period, because that's not true. It didn't look at all like that at all.
No.
And if you turn around and have that statement, then you're ignoring the development of the beautiful, cloaks that were around at the time, the brat, and also the lena, the tunic, because they're absolutely beautiful and should be taking the time to study that, because that's our history, So I think ignoring the development and the history of it is ignoring a huge part of our development in history as Scottish and Irish people, and even Welsh people. There's Welsh people now taking it on as well, which is a part of their history as well, because Wales has its own development of cloaks and tunics as well.
Well, it was its own principality, its own kingdom, basically, until the 12th century is when that all changed, right? So the thing about I'm going to apologize to everyone who actually speaks Gaelic, Scots Gaelic, because I don't. I tried to learn the proper pronunciation of this word earlier today, but if I mispronounce it, I apologize. So the word for the garment that people in English now call a kilt, the Gaelic word for that is fielu. And that basically means and that comes from the Old Irish, actually, fial, which comes from the classical Latin word velum, which means veil or curtain. And fial also means veil. And so, this word fialu means basically it's a wrap. It's a kind of thing you wrap around your body. It's like you said, it's a kind of cloak. And so when people, the problem is that people see that word in medieval documents, in medieval Gaelic documents, and they assume that because we now call the kilt in Gaelic the fiala, it wasn't called that. That wasn't the same word was used, but it wasn't referring to the same kind of garment, right? Just because we use the word tunic is a great example. The shape of the tunic, its ornamentation, the fabrics out of which it's been made have changed drastically since the Roman Empire. They were wearing tunics in ancient Egypt. They were wearing tunics in Mesopotamia. But that doesn't mean that it looked the same as the tunics worn in the 12th century or the 13th century or the 14th century or the 15th century in any country. So just because the word is the same doesn't mean it's the same garment. And I think that's where we're running into a lot of issues, is that people get all excited. Look, I found the Gaelic word for what we now call a kilt from this 11th century document. Ergo, they wore pleated miniskirts in the 11th century.
Yeah, it's not quite like that in the development. How does it develop? Because you were saying before, especially in from the 13th century, what happens in Ireland and Scotland that there's a sudden change and we go from having, cloaks and tunics, lenas, to suddenly developing into the kilt? Like, what happens, especially linguistically? Like, what happens to the language?
So the fashion change is actually in the 16th century. Linguistically, the word fiel just kind of stays there. It's kind of there the whole time, but it's the thing it's referring to actually isn't really changing that much until the 15th century, because it's referring to the cloak, and the cloak, it's like the brat. It's the equivalent of the brat, actually.
Oh, sound just went a wee bit. Is that my sound or your sound?
Okay, I don't know. I feel like there are gremlins because suddenly I started getting all these error messages on my camera, which is a little weird. So apparently the ghosts that occupy this apartment were taking control of the thing. Yeah, so Smurf says it. A kilt is just a blanket and a belt. Yes, my friend. Yes, it is. That is exactly what it is.
Yes.
So, and that's why, the old Irish word fial from the Latin velum is very relevant, because that tells you how it was viewed. It was viewed as being a wrap, a curtain. And what really starts changing is the weather, is the climate.
Yes.
That's what starts changing. And especially, God forbid, up in the Highlands of Scotland, Jesus Christ. Because, Ireland's actually mild. It's relatively mild in Ireland, right? Ireland benefits from the Gulf Stream and always has. God forbid the Gulf Stream ever shift. Ireland is so screwed.
Nightmares.
But the Highlands don't benefit from that same Gulf Stream effect. Like they're kind of off of the currents, so it's much more cold. The weather is much more brutal, and basically in about the 13th century, the climate starts cooling, and Europe starts to enter the Little Ice Age. And by the time you get to the 16th century, the rivers are freezing so hard all across Europe that they can have ice fairs on them.
Jesus.
Right? You can have horses with sleighs, pulling sleighs. You can, the Thames. Seriously, Thames frozen. So can you imagine it? Frozen so solid that you can set up market stalls for the winter. And you can have...
That is absolutely wild.
Right? I wouldn't do that now.
like I'm thinking to myself, if I was in the comment section, I'd be like, this woman is making this up.
I'm not.
You're definitely not making this up, are you? You couldn't be that
I am not. It was... and it got only colder and colder. So the Little Ice Age ends... We basically terminate the Little Ice Age manually by the Industrial Revolution. We force it to end by pouring out pollution into the air that starts heating things up again. But yeah, the Little Ice Age changes fashions all across Europe, not just in Ireland, not just in Scotland. Everyone starts bundling up and putting on more layers and finding extra ways to stay warm that still allow them mobility, right? That's the key. right? You need, I don't, the Irish, I don't know why they never belted their brat. Like that doesn't, I don't get it, but
Will they belt it? I think it's just probably not recorded.
maybe,
Maybe they did belt it,
maybe,
especially during the William Knight and Jacobite Wars. I could imagine lads just kind of chucking it on. The thing is, the massive difference between the Scots who come over here and are belting their kilt and stuff in Ireland. I don't know about Scotland, but in Ireland is because they're over here for a long period of time.
right.
So they want to be able to make sure that their cloak is always on them. When the Gallowglass and the Kern, the Irish warriors, they live in Ireland. You know, they
Yeah,
permanently live in
right,
Ireland. So afterwards, they can easily go back onto the battlefield, pick up their stuff again, or just go off into the castle. Even if it goes missing,
right,
they're not sleeping out in the forest and stuff. They have a castle to go back to afterwards. The poor Redshanks, the Scottish who were over here fighting during the summer
yeah,
with the Irish, you know, against rival clans and against the English and stuff, they have to sleep in that same cloak that night in the rough
yep,
stars if they don't have a friend to go home with.
yep,
So the Scottish, even in battle and stuff, have to hold on to their cloak, the kilt, the great kilt, as you guys in the comment section are calling it
yep,
now. So I think that's why maybe, you know, kilting up the great, you know, the great kilt and stuff became a thing, especially building up. But on saying that, I could imagine Irish women who are, you know, doing their stuff out, you know, doing the farming or whatever they're doing, the administration around the castle or the fort or whatever they're living at,
right.
or even their husband, you know, who's doing the work outside and stuff, getting a big cloak and just kilting it up as well. So I could imagine them doing it. But at the same time, I can imagine why it wasn't
Yeah,
documented because of the fact that they weren't living it rough out in the
right.
forest. So
Well, so
that's my
here's the
interpretation.
interesting thing. In the end of the 16th century, I found a chronicle that talks about how the Irish, the Cairn, could tell the
Yeah.
difference. They could tell who these Scottish soldiers were, the Highlanders were, because they belted their brat. They refer to them
Okay.
as brat because they belted their
Yeah.
brat, right? So it was a difference between the Irish and the Highlanders in that era at the end of the 16th century. So which tells me that the Irish weren't for whatever
Okay.
reason. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. But either way,
Mm.
the word kilt is not Gaelic. It's not Scots.
Okay.
No,
Oh.
it's Norse, and it comes from
Oh.
it comes to Scots through Middle English. So
Okay.
the word kilt enters the English language in about the 14th century, is its earliest documented word, and it's a verb.
Yeah.
It's a verb. So it has nothing
Yeah.
to do with folding. It has nothing to do with pleating. The only thing it has to do with is trussing something up. That's all kilting
Yeah.
means.
That's interesting. Now, this is where you're going to end up ranting
Yeah,
again,
probably.
because I'm going to trigger off another one of your rants. That's interesting because, and the comment section, I'm surprised the comment section isn't saying fast enough. The Viking connection, because of the fact that Norway is so close to Ireland and what was it? Yeah, Ireland and
Yep.
Scotland. What's very interesting as well is tartan makes, or plaid, as you guys call it as well, that makes a return during the 10th century. But what's interesting about that is they think it actually originated from Norway first in the 10th century.
Yep.
Now, plaid, the thing about plaid and tartan is it goes away from fashion, it returns from fashion, it goes away again. But during the Viking Age, they think it first appears in the Viking Norway territories and then makes its way over to Scotland and Ireland. So tartan does pop up in the 10th century, but they think that wave comes in from Norway and then goes to Scotland and Ireland, which is very interesting you bring that up. But they don't, as I was saying there, and you can correct me on this one, Rachel, that falls back out of fashion again, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Like tartan and plaid, that seems to go in and out of fashion like all the time.
It does. I mean, everywhere across Europe. So in 13th and in 14th century Italy and Spain, that pattern seems to have been popular, and England and France. We have evidence of what is now called a plaid or a tartan, but was absolutely not in the Middle Ages. We have evidence of that pattern being a fashion fabric. We have depictions of nobility wearing garments like that. We have expense accounts for members of the aristocracy purchasing garments in cloth of that pattern. So what we now call plaid or tartan was not just a homespun item that was only popular in remote parts of Scotland and Ireland. It was a high-end fashion fabric in many parts of Europe in the 13th and 14th centuries. But the funny thing about the word tartan, and we had this discussion in our last live stream, and I triggered someone by suggesting that the Tatars were mythical as far as the Europeans were concerned. But anyway, the word tartan comes from the French tartarin, which was in the 13th century a silk and cotton blend, a luxury fabric. And because it was a blend of two completely different fibers, I suspect that it would have had a pattern that you could see, even if the colors were the same. If it was blue cotton and blue silk, the silk would have had a sheen, the cotton wouldn't, and so you would be able to see that checkered pattern in the fabric. But it was an extreme luxury item because cotton fabric in the 13th century, cotton was grown in India. It was grown in Egypt. It was not grown anywhere on mainland Europe. Maybe in Cyprus, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know when the cotton industry in Cyprus really kicked off. But it was a luxury fabric. It was a very fine fabric. And so if you see the word tartarin or tartar referring to fabric in Scots, by the way, in Scots expense accounts, it's not referring to wool. It's referring to a luxury silk.
Jesus, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's wild. I actually never thought about it that way because I am aware.
Go on. Yeah.
No, I was just saying I am aware that in the 10th century as well, you've got that massive trade because in the 10th century, because of Dublin, Viking Dublin, and its connections to the wider world, you have an economic golden age that happens in Dublin, allowing all these fancy goods to travel from Egypt, Baghdad, even farther afield from China. We have, what was it called? A Chinese headpiece. Oh God, what are they called again that you cover your head with? It's made of silk.
Chinese
basic scarf. That's the one. Scarf. That's the one.
Okay.
There is There's an Irish silk scarf. It's Chinese. It's a Chinese silk scarf that appears in Dublin, and it's dated to the 10th century.
I know the one you're talking about. It's gorgeous. Yeah. Kerchief is the word you're looking for, by the way.
Yeah. I actually haven't seen
it.
I actually haven't
you haven't seen it? It's not, it's beautiful, but I mean, it's not like, to me as a textile or a fashion historian with some understanding of historical textiles, a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of fabric can be beautiful to me if it's 2,000 years old. So probably the average modern person wouldn't be impressed by it because it's not like a whole garment or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Somebody else was also asking in the comment section, there was Danish Gael clans or seps, was there? That's towards myself. Yes, you do have Danish. You see, they fit in, the Danish and the Norwegians during the Viking Age fit into clan systems so well compared to the English and the French, because they're kind of in their warband groups, and when they come in, they end up marrying through both force and marriage alliance. They end up marrying Irish women, and from there, because they're following the Brehon law at that point, they're following the laws of their wife. They fit into Irish society much more easier. So you're right. It's around 850 that there's a large Danish group that comes in with Ivor the Boneless and Olaf the White that settle around Dublin and Waterford. It's Mihal from Clans and Dynasties who he's amazing at dealing with the Viking families that come into Ireland during the 10th century. We normally do live streams. I'll try to do a live stream with him this weekend, but I'll be over in Taiwan, so I'll see what I can do there. It was the same thing this morning with Rachel trying to get me on because I'm so bloody busy with both Taiwan and the projects. Trying to make time was bloody, but it was so important because of St. Patrick's Day, and you guys are absolutely loving the live stream right now. So I'm so grateful you guys showed up. But yes, if you want more information on that, myself, Mihal, and Dr. Owen O'Neill will try. Well, the two boys will be live regardless, but I'll try to get in there, and that's on the 21st for you guys, 21st on around about the same time as now. So try to jump on for that one on the weekend for sure.
So we had a really good comment from Brian, who's been putting out some really great information. Thank you, Brian, for that myth busting. He points out that plaids, as we call them now, were not bound up by clan allegiance in historically. That's a very recent phenomenon, or like early 19th century is when the so-called, what we now call a plaid, became officially affiliated with specific clan allegiances. And that's something that really bothers a lot of people, because of course the myths that have been floating around basically since at least Braveheart, that clan quote unquote tartans are ancient, and they're just not. I hate to tell everyone this. I have found zero evidence for specific clan identifying patterns of weave of fabric from the Middle Ages. I just haven't seen it. So
yeah, what's your interpretation of, and this is me asking the question now, what's your interpretation of local colors? And also, what's your interpretation of, and I know Celtic Templar brings this up a lot as well, is the fishing belts, the belts that fishermen used to wear as well, both in Norway, Scotland, and Ireland, to identify where they come from when they're lost at sea. What's your interpretation of that, and also local colors?
Yeah, so the local colors argument, so for those who don't know, dye stuffs in the pre-industrial world come mostly from plants and insects. Almost uniquely, there's one synthetic dye from ancient Mesopotamia, but I don't remember what it is offhand. Anyway, it comes mostly from plants and animals, insects. So what is locally, if you are a home spinner, a home weaver in an isolated part of the Highlands, for instance, what local plants are available for you to use as dye stuffs will certainly impact the colors that are easier and more common for you to weave than others. So what that means is that perhaps, the homespun woolens that someone, up there near Inverness is weaving in the 13th century might be more likely to be this color and that color. And I haven't done any kind of botanical research to actually know what might be more common in the northwestern corner of Scotland than the northeastern corner of Scotland. So I'm not even going to pretend. I shall not dissemble, prevaricate, or demur. I will just say that could mean that if someone is wearing a wool garment that is, red and yellow, then someone might assume, oh, there must be from that part of the country, because that's where this plant, this kind of dye stuff is most common. But that doesn't mean that they were always weaving exactly the same patterns.
Yeah.
Right? It just means that those were the colors that they may have been using more often. And it also doesn't mean that they were always weaving checked and striped fabrics. They may have decided that they just wanted a nice yellow wool or a nice brown wool instead of always making a yellow and brown wool. Humans are peacocks. We like to dress in different colors as much as possible. We like to vary our attire from day to day. So yes, there could be some kind of association. These colors are more common in this part of Scotland, but that doesn't mean that it was necessarily identifiable as, oh, well, you must be a Stuart.
Okay. But what's the story with them fishing belts
the
then?
Fishing
the ones
belts.
that we're finding in Norway, Scotland, and Ireland?
I haven't seen any kind of evidence for the fishing belts being used by anyone but fisher people. Okay. Really, I haven't seen any kind of evidence of those in daily life, and I'm not saying that means that they weren't used. I am stating very clearly, I haven't seen any evidence of it. You're the first person I've ever heard talk about them, honestly. It's,
because I remember myself, and I think it's great asking you, because you've such wealth of information when it comes down to clothing and stuff. And it was just stuff that myself and Celtic Templar had found studying the Chris belt, as it's been called in the sources and stuff. And like most of what we know is actually from a 19th century perspective.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be bringing 19th century perspectives into the medieval period. But there does seem to be an indication and hint from both Norway, Ireland, and Scotland that fishermen were wearing belts going out there. And if they got lost at sea, they were able to be identified and then brought home. But is that mostly a 19th century interpretation, or do we actually have crisp belts from the medieval period that identify, oh, you're a part of this clan and you're a part of that clan? And were they wearing crisp belts? Because according to Celtic Templar, there seems to be a very good indication then that people were wearing these belts into battle and then be able to go, oh, you were part of Mac Sweeney, or you were part of the O'Briens. Like, is that just coincidence, or is this legitimate? This is how they were able to distinguish who was who on the battlefield.
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't see that those belts would be terribly visible unless they were super wide. And you look at the kind of heraldry that, I mean, Ryan is miming something like a waist corset size to be visible, right?
Into those vests that they wear now, they're super bright.
Right. It's, you look at the kind of symbols that peoples have used across history to visually distinguish themselves on the battlefield, and they don't tend to be small and belt-like. They tend to be big and loud, so that there is no confusion. So I would be interested in seeing the actual primary source evidence for that practice. Yeah. I haven't seen it myself, so I can't say anything to it from the perspective of I interpret the history differently. I can only observe it from the perspective of battle is hell. It's chaos. You don't want to be squinting at someone's waist to see what colors those are. Also, they're not going to stay clean. They're not going to stay clean. They're not going to stay bright. They're not going to stay colorful. They're going to get covered in mud and blood. They're going to get covered in oil from armor. They're going to get bled into if they're wearing some kind of leather armor, which is not as documentable as people might like to think it is. The dye stuffs will bleed into the belt. I don't see, from a practical perspective, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and Fox is agreeing with you as well. They're just not wide enough to be identified on the battlefield.
No, stop. Okay, Ryan wants to make a comment.
Okay, so when I was at Penzic and fighting on the field with hundreds of people, and we had these super bright pieces of tape on our foreheads and the backs of our heads to try and identify us, a lot of people still ended up killing their own teammates. It was still not big enough, even though it was like fluorescent tape.
Fluorescent red and fluorescent blue, and people were still mistaking each other. So from a practical perspective, I just don't see that as being very doable, unless it's like a whole body belt, right? Like just a wrap all the way, like the obi in a kimono, right? Just wrapped around their bodies entirely.
It's definitely like to be honest with you guys, I love the crisp belt. But we need to do more study into it, which reminds me, you can actually fund our study into that, because myself and Rachel actually already have a GoFundMe up, which I have to reorganize when I get back from Taiwan, because I've been so insanely busy between project work, which I have to reveal at some stage to you guys, and remind Rachel about our Wars of the Roses project. We'll get back to that later. Yes. And on top of that as well, I have a Patreon where I do classes every Sunday. We'll talk about more of that later on. But we do have a 15th century GoFundMe.
We do.
Which is help read 15th century Irish ensemble, which is over at GoFundMe. So if you want to support our research into the crisp belt or 15th century clothing at large, definitely head on over to our GoFundMe page. Help recreate an 15th century ensemble. I'll send that over to the chat now for you guys. I'll put it over on Instagram. Can you guys over on Instagram hear me fine? Just curious. And I'll send that chat around. I know you guys over on YouTube can hear me perfectly fine. I'm just curious about Instagram.
And I'd like to point out that if those who support our GoFundMe are going to get access to things like my entire notes, all of my research notes, the like 20-page essay I've already put together on my findings from 15th century Irish fashion. So I'll be putting that paper up there so people can go and read it. And, our supporters, our GoFundMe supporters can read it and glean their own information from all the various primary sources I found. And, the sources that I've been referencing are things like chronicles in the 15th century, are expense inventories, our wills, our statutes and regulations. So I'm working from primary source material, guys. I don't work from secondary sources. If it's in a secondary source, I ignore it unless I can find the primary source. Yeah. So if you're interested in getting to the truth of 15th century Irish men's fashion in this case, then that's the project you can support, because I'm not coming at this with any kind of cultural bias, right? I'm not trying to prove that the Irish dressed drastically differently from the English. I'm not trying to prove that they dress the same. I just want to find out how they dressed. Yeah. I've got no skin, despite having many Irish ancestors from the 19th century. I've got no skin in this game. So, you're not going to get, it's not going to be the same as other people's interpretation of 15th century Irish fashion. I can just tell you that.
Oh, so if you want to fund that and see what the truth is between the Chris Belt, the Kilts, all that kind of stuff, definitely head on over to our GoFundMe page and check that out for sure. And also, for everybody who just jumped in there from our Instagram as well, happy St. Patrick's Day to you guys as well. Wasn't Bishop Palladius sent to Ireland before Patrick? That would mean there was an establishment of administration structure in early medieval Ireland before the arrival of St. Patrick that was recognized by the papacy. That one's quite complicated. I understand. It sounds very simple to answer because of the fact if there were Christians in Ireland already, and the fact that, Bishop Palladius is a bishop, not a missionary. Just to clarify, a bishop is somebody who sorts out the administration in that region. A missionary is somebody who goes in to convert the locals. Over St. Patrick's Day, because St. Patrick is considered a bishop, there is a lot of confusion over that as well, because Patrick from time to time did convert people as well. So, and he blurs a lot of the time between missionary work and bishop work because it's so kind of short-staffed in Ireland, I suppose. So he does blur between the two. And you're right. The fact that they sent a bishop, the Pope did, and we know this from papacy accounts, not Irish accounts. So it's actually in papacy accounts that they did send St. Palladius just before St. Patrick, around 410, to Ireland, which highlights the fact, and you were saying a little bit about that beforehand as well, Rachel, that there was some kind of Christian community in Ireland before the arrival of Palladius onto the island, which brings in more questions of what Christianity was like before the arrival of both Patrick and Palladius onto the island. Right. I thought St. Patrick chased all the snakes out of Ireland.
Oh, yes. That old chestnut. That old chestnut. It's really easy to chase the snakes out of a place if there are never snakes in the first place.
Yes. There's actually, weirdly enough, there's actually an account from Julius Caesar himself, which states that there were no snakes in Ireland. So that's the time of Julius Caesar, who's around 30 BC. So he's around 30 BC, isn't it? 30 to 30 AD.
The 50s to 40s. So when he's, so you're talking about his conquest of Gaul and his that era. That's like the 50s BC. So,
So that's when Julius Caesar accounts that there are no snakes in Ireland. So he quite literally says that. So, and the thing is as well, is the idea of St. Patrick driving out the snakes from Ireland is actually from the 19th century. And so a lot of people use it as ammunition that St. Patrick came to Ireland with an axe and started chopping everyone up, which isn't the case. It's not true.
People like to, a lot of modern people like to say, well, everyone knows that snakes are a metaphor for the pagans. And so really it's about Patrick driving out the pagans. And that's just not how his mission worked. And not just driving out, but, driving away paganism. And not only is that not how his mission worked, if you want to view his success based on did paganism end with St. Patrick too, it did not. So
Yeah, because it seems to blur in. What we call it online is Celtic Christianity, and the academics call it insular Christianity. And there seems to be not a pagan versus Christian fight that's going on. It seems to more or less blur together, like St.
Yeah,
Bridget being one of the best examples, as I was saying early on. Like before the
yeah,
arrival of Saint Patrick, she may have been a goddess referred to as, Burgundies, the goddess Burgundies that came from
right,
the north of England. Perhaps, maybe we don't really have any solid evidence for that. And because you would have had a druidess there or an abbess there before the arrival of Saint Patrick, the woman who was there may have converted to Christianity. And because
right.
Bridget was such a popular name at the time, there may have been a woman there called Bridget, converted to Christianity, took on the title of Abbess of
Yeah.
Kildare. That perhaps may be what happened, but we still trying to find solid proof of that, to be honest with you guys. So I know everybody's really passionate about it. Oh, I know it's this way, I know it's that way. We still don't have any solid evidence of that. Sadly, from the time, we only have two letters written by St. Patrick, which is the Confessio, and we have the letter to Croticus, which can be all found on confessio.ie for that.
Yeah.
And you can read it right now, by the way. You can read the words of St. Patrick over on confessio.ie.
But that's the beautiful thing about history, and that's why you and I love it so much, is that it's
Yeah.
not known. It's
Yeah.
not all set in stone. We are constantly discovering new sources, new documents, new archaeology that casts a new light, that adds to our knowledge. So, for a long time, for literally centuries, people thought that the Trojan War was a legend. And then at the end of the 19th century, these Victorian scholars studying cuneiform tablets from ancient Assyria discover these tablets that talk about Walusa and a prince named Paris and this great war that has happened there. And everyone's like, holy shit, the Trojan War was real. Troy was real. Ilium was a real place. So, it's entirely possible that some archaeological study, survey conducted somewhere in Ireland will unearth some ancient site that has, maybe papyrus scrolls, maybe texts written in the old Irish language, the old Irish writing system, right? We could discover something that casts a whole new light on this whole story. So, just what we know now is not what we may know in a couple of years or even in a century.
Yeah. But I'm starting to think the AI, people asking if we're AI, are the AI.
Okay. So I saw a question. What am I doing? First off, I'm not AI. Hold on a minute. Let me show you the blister on my finger that will prove to you that I'm not AI. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, it feels so. My real blistered finger, which hurts for real.
Wow.
I am doing a medieval craft called lace making in 15th century English. Now we call it finger loop braiding. I am making cords for the armor, for my husband's armor. Let me see if I can get it to focus. Yeah, there we go. Cords out of rough hemp yarn, hence the blisters, that will allow my husband's armor to be attached to his clothing and fit his body like a glove and move with him like a well-honed piece of equipment instead of the clunky jousting armor that people think is what medieval knights wore, whereas most jousting armor is from the 16th century. So, we are not AI. I know Philip's background is, I don't know what it is. Is it AI or is it just like one of those fillers?
Is all fake. Yeah, it's probably an AI, to be honest with you. I just kind of grabbed it off the internet. I was like, St. Patrick's background, because my whole background right now is a complete mess because I'm packing for Taiwan. So everything is all over the place. I still have project work. If you're texting me saying, is the project work done? No, nothing is done. I'm trying to rush around, trying to do everything. I'll be up until 1 a.m. And then I have to get up at 6 a.m. to run to Taiwan. So no, nothing is done. And it's the same with my wife as well. My wife is at work up to her head with loads and loads of stuff. So we're literally finishing what we're doing and running off to Taiwan. So busy off of us.
Oh, and speaking of backgrounds, everyone, this is not AI. This is a real tapestry. This is a replica of an original 15th century tapestry from La Dame à la Licorne series at the Musée de Cluny in Paris. This is a real tapestry. It weighs a lot. It's made of wool and linen. So no, not A. There is no AI anywhere in my screen. Philip is using some kind of artificially generated thing, but he's real. He is real. His words are real.
What was it called? Tip. What's with you and snakes? What was it called? If you're trying to trick us into saying that there's no snakes in Ireland right now, yeah, of course there's snakes in Ireland right now as pets, and probably a few that have escaped into the wild.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about what Julius Caesar has to say, Julius Caesar says there was no snakes in Ireland before the arrival of St. Patrick. If you want to disagree with Julius Caesar, and I can understand why people would disagree with Julius Caesar, that's your beef with Julius Caesar. I'm just saying what he said from the first century BC. I've no clue, to be honest with you, if he's lying or not.
And I think part of the problem might be, I think that the kind of snake that is actually possibly native to Ireland is a blind snake, and they actually kind of look a little bit more like worms, even though they're not. Yeah. I'm saying I think. This is me operating from memory, not having looked this up because I didn't think we'd have so much conversations about snakes today. But I should have. I should have guessed that's where this was always going to go. Mm-hmm. But a blind snake looks more like a worm. Yeah. And so I could see the Romans going there and being like, oh, well, they don't really have snakes, but they have those big worm things, but that's not a snake.
To be honest with you, they probably didn't even see that, because I've heard about the snake since I was a child and never came across any of this stuff. I think there must be insanely rare, because you can get a worm so easy. You literally, you don't even have to do anything. You just tap the mud and a worm pops up in Ireland that says hello. Not so much here in Okinawa, but in Ireland, oh geez, it's so easy. You tap. I remember I used to do it as a child all the time. There's so many worms on the ground. I don't know what it's like these days, because people are trying to kill the earth. But back when I was a child anyway, you used to just tap the mud and a worm will pop up and say hello. And then you could just grab it and go fishing. That's how it worked as a child.
Right. Foxweaver, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. Good pause for everyone, or good pause for us to say, if you're enjoying this fantastic way of learning history, not like you learned it in school, then consider liking and subscribing to the Creative Contessa and Irish Medieval History, 2 different channels. Check them both out, please. And if you're on a mobile device, just double tap the screen to like. But also, I'd like to point out there to any haters, if you hit the thumbs down, you're still supporting our channel. If you leave nasty comments in the live chat or in the comments, you're still supporting our channel, because YouTube loves the negative engagement. So just putting that out there.
What was it called? I was going to waffle something else for another 20 minutes, and I can't remember what I needed to waffle about. Because we covered the thing on kilts. We talked about the 2 St. Patricks. Is there anything else we need to waffle on about?
Okay, someone just wanted to see what it is I'm making. So I'm making cords that look like this. Right. It looks like, and I know some of you are going to say, well, that kind of looks like big, thick shoelaces. Well, yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
This is the handmade original way to make laces. And the reason we call them shoelaces is because this is what lace originally was. Yep. Let's see. Plaid, the word plaid. Someone brought up the word plaid earlier. As a pattern of fabric. So the word plaid is actually a Scots word. It's not a Gaelic word. It was introduced into Gaelic from Scots. And do you know what plaid means? All it means?
No, I don't. Can you explain what plaid means, please?
It means blanket.
Oh, yeah. That's very interesting.
It's basically a brat. It's fielo. It's just the Scots word for it, but it had nothing to do with a pattern at all in the Middle Ages or even the Renaissance. So it doesn't. When you see people wearing plaid, if you read a 16th century Gaelic or Scots text and you read the word plaid, they're not talking about the pattern. They're talking about a big blanket that you can wrap around your person.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah. And that's how we get to the kilt. I've said this before, but I'll say it again, Philip. how awkward would it be to run around with 6 to 8 yards of fabric just kind of wrapped around you with no belt? Would that be convenient and easy to actually, oh, I don't know, ride a horse or defend yourself?
I wouldn't say it's that easy, to be honest with you, but it's interesting the description you give, because at the same time, there's a word describing Scots people in Ireland calling
Mm-hmm.
red shanks,
Right.
basically highlighting that these guys are running around barefoot and their feet are starting to go red. And it's very interesting that you're given this image of them just wearing a lena, a tunic, and then on top of that, just having their cloak on, and then
Right.
kilting this thing up, which kind of, it gives that
Yep.
image of these Scottish war, kilted, Celtic, kilted people up. It's interesting kind of imagery we're starting to produce now, and we can see that evolution going from
Right.
a tunic and a great cloak, and then suddenly when they start to kilt this up, they put the belt on, and they,
Yep.
and they're not wearing pants at the time because they're fighting and stuff, because they wear trolls pants instead of what everyone else in Europe is wearing, so it's prone to tearing, isn't it? A trolls when you're running around.
Yeah, true. Yeah, trues. Yeah, trues are worn. Yeah, because they're joined. So, the thing is that the red shanks thing, as I have it, I don't know if you have seen pre 1500 documentation for that expression. As far as I know, the term red shanks is a later 16th century moniker, so it's not medieval either.
Okay.
But there's a depiction, the earliest depiction I have seen, of a Scotsman wearing basically the plaid, the blanket, the fielo, wrapped around himself and belted, is from 1594, and it's actually a Dutch traveler who did the sketch. Because those freaking Protestants in Scotland burnt like all of the art and destroyed it all as part of their iconoclastic movements, right? Yeah. So thankfully, these Dutch travelers, the same Dutch travelers who were over in Ireland, by the way, sketching people, they depict what they call a Highland man and a Highland lady. That's what it's called, basically. That's what it's labeled as in Dutch. And it depicts this man who is wearing a doublet and hosen. He's wearing trunk hosen down to his knees. He has his nether hosen, his lower hosen rolled down, basically his knee socks rolled down so that his calves are bare, but he still has shoes on. He's not barefoot. But his lower legs are exposed. And over his doublet and his hosen, very fashionable, by the way, he has a plaid neatly wrapped around his body and belted around the waist in such a way that he can be warm, he can still move, and most importantly, I think he can access his side sword. That's, I think, what is really important there. But he's not wearing just a tunic and this wrap. He is wearing a doublet and hosen. Fashionable.
Right, that makes more sense.
And then the lady that's depicted, her it's called an aris, and I didn't bother to look up the pronunciation of this, so I'm going to mispronounce it. Called an arisaid, Arisaid, is the lady's version of the felo. And she is basically wearing, you can kind of see at the bottom of her feet, you can see her skirts a little bit peeking out through the opening in her arisaid, but it's not belted. It's just this giant cloak that's wrapped around her, basically, that goes from like here, because it's cold, all the way down to her feet. But under it, you can see that she's basically wearing the same kinds of things they were wearing in England at the time.
That's interesting.
And the interesting thing is that you can tell that this Dutch, that by the time, at the end of this is like the 1590s, that by the time this Dutch traveler was in Scotland traveling and documenting, it must be that what we now call the plaid pattern, the tartan pattern, had fallen out of fashion, because his depiction of it as just being a straight up checkered fabric, weavers look at this thing and they're like, you can't weave fabric that way.
Okay.
So he didn't quite understand entirely what he was looking at, right? He got the general idea that in the warp and the weft are different colors, and that it creates a kind of checky pattern. But the way he depicts it, all the weavers I've talked to are like, I know, that's not quite right. But that's the earliest depiction I've seen, and the belted plaid is not pleated. It's not pleated in any way. It really is just wrapped. It's kind of elegant. It's very Roman, actually. It kind of looks like a little bit of a Roman toga the way it's wrapped. It's very dignified, right?
Yeah.
There's definitely nothing about it says I'm a country bumpkin or I'm a mountain a mountain idiot. Everything about it says I'm a dignified, powerful gentleman. I'm wrapped in this garment that keeps me warm, but also I can still kill you if I need to.
Yeah.
And it's not pleated under the belt at all. The belt is just belted. It's wrapped around him in such a way that it does its thing of preventing him from suffering from hypothermia.
Ah, that makes perfect sense. So it's around the 15th, 16th century that we're starting to see the foundation of more of this kind of Scottish look. Would I be right by saying that? We're only seeing the foundation. They're definitely not transforming into 19th century Scottish men yet. Still a level of vision there.
Yep, it's the end of the 16th century, which is so beyond the Middle Ages that it doesn't even apply. And the idea of the kilt in this era is literally that you kilt the plaid up through the belt, and it has a little pouch in the depiction, a little pouch over top of the belt, so that it doesn't just pull off his body and go straight down. Because if you don't kilt the garment over the belt, it won't stay under the belt or over the belt. It will fall through. So you need to actually kind of create a little shelf, a little ledge over it. I wish I had my belt. I could demonstrate kilting. You need to create a little shelf for the fabric to kind of catch on the belt. So that's what kilting is. Kilting has goose egg to do with pleating, with vertical pleats. It has everything to do with folding up, not with folding like this. So, and it doesn't become a noun in the word kilt does not become a noun in the English language until the 18th century. So, and that's why I think that's part of the problem. People look up the word fielu and then they see that the translation, the Gaelic word, they see the translation is kilt. So they assume that must have always been the translation, but it's not.
Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating. People asking about guns in Ireland.
What? How did we get on that topic? I was talking about side swords. Why are we talking about guns?
Just to answer people's questions, gun laws in Ireland are actually quite complicated. It's interesting if you're going back, because it's also the 15th, 16th century when a lot of this stuff is happening as well, that Ireland has a really good relationship with the Iberian Peninsula and with Spain, which fits into what we're talking about now as well, because the Irish start to bring in loads of guns from the Iberian Peninsula into Ireland. So you start to see all these cattle raiders running around trying to rob each other's cattle and fight the English with guns now from the Iberian Peninsula. A great book on that is Jim O'Neill's work on the 9 Years' War. So definitely pick up Jim O'Neill's book on the 9 Years' War. There's something else that they're bringing in from the Iberian Peninsula around this time as well into Ireland. That's saffron, isn't it? Because a lot of people believe saffron comes in, from ancient times. It's always coming into Ireland. But through my research, I haven't seen any of it until coming up to the 16th, 17th century, coming in from the Iberian Peninsula. Would I be right in saying that, Rachel? And how does that fit in with Ireland's interpretation of the kilt?
So, the saffron actually there's actually documentation of saffron farms in England starting in the 14th century.
Oh.
So saffron Weldon, it's actually the place where it was done still has the name saffron in it. Saffron Weldon, something like that. Saffron Weldon. Don't quote me on the latter part of the name, but they start growing saffron in England in the 14th century. So it is entirely possible that Ireland had access to saffron through trade routes, either coming up through the Iberian Peninsula earlier, and then later on by the 14th century from England, right? But it is still saffron. Saffron is in the Middle Ages at many times worth its weight in gold. And you would need a lot of saffron to create a deep yellow dye. So it is entirely likely that the word saffron, and the word saffron is often used to mean a color. like the color that saffron could create, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was dyed with saffron. Because in Ireland, there are many other plants that are weeds that grow everywhere that can be used to create a pretty decent bright yellow. Right? Lots of them. So there's no need, and it cannot be that every I'm trying to think of the Irish names for Patrick Dick or John Dick and Harry could afford to have saffron dyed garments. That's ridiculous. That can't be. But everyone could probably afford to have at least a yellow dyed garment and then call it saffron. It's like the early fake. Ancient Rome had a fake luxury goods industry. They had a fake Tyrian purple industry. We now have fake Prada, fake Chanel, fake Gucci. In Ireland, they had fake saffron too. They had fake luxury yellow. So, it's this idea that everyone is running around in actually saffron dyed shirts, very unlikely. Things that are yellowed, sure. And that everyone would claim that it was dyed yellow with saffron, 100%. No one is going to admit that they're using knockoff saffron to dye their garments.
Yeah. You guys don't live in Ireland, do you? Because you guys are talking about the strangest laws in Ireland. Just to make it clear there, just to go off point and I'll jump back on again. I never said Ireland doesn't have the right to guns. Ireland has complicated laws. My whole family, by the way, have guns in Ireland, and farmers all have guns as well. So the statement that Ireland has no guns is just ignorant and stupid. And what was it called? Ireland passing laws.
I've seen Boondock Saints. I know they have guns.
yeah. Like our farmers all have guns. That's why you don't go rob a farmer. Like the same landlords of the medieval period are armed, but the farmers also don't want you to be armed to rob their cows. So, and it's the same thing with laws. Like the laws have been adjusted from we have some of the same laws from the Brehon laws. They're still in Ireland today, but they're adjusted for Ireland. So the whole idea that we should have the same laws of wherever you come from is just silly,
Yeah. I mean, I think my friend Patrick said, as he commented, he was like, "Open carry swords." Like, I get behind this message. We should definitely go back to open carry swords.
I'm not going to delve too much into it because you guys are talking about you guys now are mixing up Canada and Ireland and Britain together, because I know Canada and Britain recently have gotten strict with their laws, but that's not Ireland. I'm from Ireland, so
yeah.
And
not the northern one either.
yeah. Like, if you're interested in Ireland, you should definitely sit down and read about Ireland in your own time. I wouldn't trust what the media has to say because, the media has an agenda it wants to sell. So you guys are going to get hyped for that one.
Clickbait.
Yeah. But yeah, it's funny because it's not until you get up to the period of the Williamite and Jacobite Wars that the British bring in laws into Ireland to restrict weapons. During that period as well, how does the kilt start to transform as well with the, going into the 18th and 19th century with the William and Jacobite Wars? Is that when we finally start to see a real interpretation of the kilt?
Yeah, so I think this as what do we call this small kilt, which by the way is translated better as a small wrap, and actually that's what it's translated on Wikipedia. So whoever wrote the Wikipedia article on kilts actually was working with good information instead of the usual bullshit. But yeah, it's in the 18th century that we first see, as far as I know, the small kilt. And that's when you start seeing things like pleats that are, formally incorporated into the garment. But even still, that's not the same thing that is more or less created in the early 19th century and pushed forward as here is the official traditional clothing of Scotland. But it is in the 18th century when we definitely start to see something that is much more recognizable to modern people. But you
For
and I
sure.
talked about the 19th century nationalist movement that infects all of Europe, right? Everyone suddenly wants to have their own traditional costume that identifies them as being different from their neighbors. It's a prelude to a world war, right? If we look different, if we have different culture, then we can justify invading our neighbors and taking their things.
People asking in the comment section. The real question here is: do you prefer northern or southern whiskey? My wife spent most of her life in Middleton, so I have no say when it comes down to whiskey. I am drinking either Jameson's Irish whiskey or the local drink from Middleton, which is Redbreast. I swear to God, we have apps. I have the apps. I swear to God, I have no say. My wife is a dictator when it comes down to whiskey in my house. She's also from Japan as well. So when it comes down to whiskey, she has the final say. And she is always 100%, especially here in Okinawa, put her foot down that we only buy, when it comes down to whiskey, Jameson's Irish whiskey. There is no Scottish alcohol in my house. And even Japanese whiskey, she's like, not as good as the Jameson's Irish whiskey. And
right.
And when it comes down to local drink back home in Ireland, it is Redbreast whiskey. She literally, and see, when I mix my drink with Coke or anything, oh no, disgusts her. She is literally a Puritan when it comes down
She's
to
a
whiskey.
purist. She's a
Yes.
purist.
Oh my God.
God.
Even the way she makes her whiskey, she'll put the ice in a specific way, and then she'll dip in the whiskey and stuff and fill it up to just the right amount, and she'll sit there sipping it on a Friday and Saturday night, happy out, coming up with the funniest jokes. It's when she has a little bit of whiskey in her. I swear to God, the jokes she comes out. She'll be watching telly, and she'll suddenly come out with a few banter jokes at your man at the telly, and I'll be in stitches laughing. I can't stop. Because normally
she just needs that little bit of lubrication to lower that Japanese inhibition, right?
Yeah. Oh, she's off the hook. She's wild. She's like a machine gun sometimes. The jokes she says at the telly, it gets me going. Like, no proper. Yeah. What do you mean by proper whiskey?
Proddy whiskey? No, proddy whiskey? I'm not sure what proddy whiskey is.
Up in the north, aren't they drinking most of the Buckfast up there? The old monk's wine. But that's not just, I'd say it's proddy whiskey, to be honest. What was it? Proddy drink, anyway. Have you heard of Buckfast before, Rachel?
I have not.
I swear to God, Rachel, you'd hate it with a passion. Do you know what it is?
No, not at all.
First off, it's Northern Irish wine. So by default,
oh God,
like, Jesus Christ!
Oh God, okay.
This is the default, right? Then they get a bag of sugar. I shit you not. They sell this, by the way, and they fill it up. I've drank this before and I vomited. It is just so overwhelmingly terrible. And it's not even good wine. When they go to make Northern Irish wine, they're not making good stuff. They're making cheap stuff, right?
No.
This is like the ultimate goal of this. And it tastes like vomit, by the way. It tastes like pure vomit. And their intention is just to get knocked up. They just want to get wrecked by drinking this. And if you want to do it, if you want to get wrecked up, super hyper, this is the alcohol that do it. And that's what they're always, you will always see someone from Northern Ireland with a Buckfast at hand, ready to go. And that's why they're so wild up there. Compared to us down in Cork, with their Ultra Teas and their Strongbow and their Jameson's whiskey and our Redbreast. Who's the classy ones, huh? Who's the classy ones? I tell you, it's like the boys in the north.
Padraig has a good comment. He says the proper name, it's pronounced properly Barfast. Like barf.
Load of it.
That sounds horrifying on so many levels. I can't even start. That sounds disgusting. We actually had a good question. I don't know if you saw the question about the shirts. Did you see that one as it flashed by?
No, it must have flown by too fast. I can't find it.
So the comment was, in the 18th century, the English claimed that the Irish they would get one lena a year, and they would wear it until it was falling off their body in tatters. Yeah. And they were wondering, what's the veracity of that? I've actually seen exactly the same thing written about 16th century Irish.
Mm.
So I think it might predate the 18th century.
Yeah.
I I have you seen evidence that this was actually a thing that people did? They had exactly one lena. They wore it the whole year. They didn't wash it, and they wore it until it fell off their bodies in tatters. That just
I,
doesn't seem like a thing
yeah.
anyone would want to do.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it makes no sense to me. It seems to be just over exaggerated statements and stuff. I
Right.
would say what they probably saw was people going around doing the administration around their home, wearing the old clothing and stuff. But I definitely cannot imagine, especially if you were having a clan gathering, an assembly around the monastic areas or around the tower house and stuff, where you're having a clan gathering. I definitely can't imagine them wearing shitey clothing. What I could imagine is that people saw local clans people doing their administration around a ring fort or a tower house, and then thinking, oh, they're dressing terrible, because if you're doing work around Ireland, it's dirty, because
Mm,
Ireland is a very muddy,
yeah,
boggy place. It's the
it is.
same thing with people from both Scandinavia, Ireland, and Scotland not wearing shoes when they're running around the countryside doing administration. It doesn't mean that they're poor and full of poverty, because I see the same thing with Tudor. Or was it propaganda as well, saying, "Oh, they're so
Yeah,
poor they can't afford shoes." No, it's
right,
because we don't want to slip and fall. Because this is before the invention of soles. Because or was it rubber soles become popular after 1920? That's when you start to see people in the countryside starting to wear shoes. And even on top of that, even in school up to around 1960, 1970, school children would take their shoes off when running around the countryside, because they don't want to get their school shoes and also shoes for church messy and dirty. So they would
right.
often take their shoes off when running around the countryside, because it's so muddy. So I
It's
think
muddy.
that's where people got confused.
And even so, in the Middle Ages, anyway, all across Europe,
Mm,
people wore these things that are called different things in different languages, but in essence, it's called a paten in English, in medieval English. And what a paten is, what the fuck did I just do? What a paten is like a shoe for your shoe.
mm,
It's an overshoe basically, and it's intended to protect your shoe from the environment. It's intended to get you out of the mud, to get your feet out of the muck and the fecal matter that may or may not have been in the streets of medieval cities. And they had these in Ireland. I know
mm.
because I've seen excavated shoes, these patents excavated
Yeah.
in Ireland.
Mm,
But but I can also tell you from practical experience doing living history where I have gone hiking in patents and I
mm.
have traversed every kind of surface you can imagine in patents. If you're getting into seriously boggy territory,
Yeah.
which is Ireland, that's not
It
just
is.
that's not just a mud puddle, right? That's not just a little bit of mud here and there. That's
Mm,
like the ground wants to eat you.
yeah.
So you would I could absolutely see that a human would want the dexterity of their bare foot in
Mm,
order to navigate those sorts of surfaces,
yeah.
right? So that's why I would absolutely see, yeah, I'll take my shoes off and walk in the peat bog, no problem.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
But this is how dangerous it is, because we have found bog bodies in Ireland. Oh, there's some nice shoes.
Yeah, so these are it's the Italian version of those patents I was talking about. These are called pianelle, but they're not like Birkenstocks where you wear them in stocking feet. You're supposed to wear shoes. They're shoes for your shoes,
Mm.
and the ladies wore them this tall, and they get you out of the mud. But I wouldn't want to wear those walking across a boggy field in Ireland. I would probably eventually decide that I just wanted to go barefoot.
You
Mm,
would
mm,
lose.
mm.
Yeah, they would get eaten. The bog would eat those.
Yeah. Uh, what does my wife think of Tullamore Dew? When it comes down to Tullamore Dew, I reckon she prefers it over Jameson's, just because she always preferred local whiskey over Jameson's whiskey. The problem, Jameson's whiskey is really nice, right? But the problem with Jameson's whiskey is it's so it's got more of a pop taste, as in popular taste, rather than a local taste. Tullamore
Mm.
Dew, in my opinion, and you can easily correct me on this one, has more of a local Middleton taste to it rather than Jameson's. Jameson's has got more of, a taste for everyone. Do you know? Do you understand what I'm saying, Rachel? When it,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's basically it's like pop history. It's
yeah,
it's like a beginner's whiskey, right? Like
yes,
it's a
yes, yeah,
beginner's
that's one.
whiskey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where I find Yuki would definitely prefer. She was always more into the red breast, to be honest with you. Yuki is, and probably we didn't have time over the week to have anything to drink or anything. We're just going to Taiwan and stuff. But anytime we're relaxing here and stuff, she always bitches. She loves the Jamesons, but she always bitches. She prefers the Tullamore Dew and also red breast and stuff. The local drinks. That's what my wife prefers more than Jamesons, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I personally think that whiskey tastes like bog body juice, so I'm not I'm not
What do you
super.
prefer drinking?
I'm if I'm going to drink, actually, I'm a sake lover.
Oh,
I think sake is proof that God loves us.
yeah, Yuki
Um,
loves that as well. But
I love
she's
a quality sake.
yeah, she likes the Okinawan stuff, but she's so biased. She prefers her stuff from home. See, in Nagoya, that's where she prefers her drink. But she doesn't like drinking with her parents. She's just not comfortable. She's one of those type of girls that is like, I'm not drinking with my parents. So we never get drinking that much. Because her father loves having a good few drinks, but she's like, no.
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a generally a wine person, whether it's rice wine or grape wine or whatever. I think it's more my thing. Nothing too sweet. But also I don't really care for something that's so dry that I feel my mouth dehydrating. If you
Yeah,
understand the
that's very
feeling I'm
true.
trying to convey, right? I like something in the middle, honestly.
Mm,
I
yeah.
generally can't handle any alcoholic beverage that tastes like cough syrup is right out for me. Which, by
Mm.
the way, that stuff you were talking about from Northern Ireland, that sounds like cough syrup.
Oh,
We
stop. It is like, going.
sounds so gross. God.
Mm.
Someone asked, "What is she making? What is this art called?" Philip, what can you tell me? What is I'm making, and what is this art called? I've said it like, and I'm not criticizing. Some of you are just coming in, so it's a great question, and I appreciate it. But it's Philip's turn
And
to see if he's been paying attention.
on people who are just popping in now as well. Happy St. Patrick's Day, because I have a few people over on Instagram with the old Happy St. Patrick's Day as well. Thank you so much for everyone's popped in and also have donated to the channel as well. That means so much to us, to everybody. So, what is Rachel making? Rachel is making well, she's fixing her husband's kit right now. Specifically, what are you making is pieces to tie up your husband's armor, isn't it? If
Mhm.
I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Yep, these are what in Middle English are called points, but it's laces or
Points.
laces. Yeah, and the technique is finger loop braiding because I've no more
Mm.
loops on my hands. But you basically have long loops of thread or yarn, and you braid the loops in and out of each other. So I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel, everyone, depending on where you're watching from. I have a tutorial on making a really beautiful but simple finger loop braid called the Green Dorge. And it's a 22-minute tutorial from beginning to end, demonstrates all the steps you would need, helps guide you through the setup process, the actual braid itself, and how to finish it. So if you look up braiding beautifully on my YouTube channel, you can find the tutorial on that. So if you'd like to make your own, I mean, I also use them since it came out anyway. I also use finger loop braiding to tie off my hair.
Oh,
So I
nice.
don't use elastics or microplastics or anything like that. I use the finger loop braids to tie off my hair as well. So,
Mm.
you know, it's a useful skill to have. You never know when you might need a pretty tie for something.
For sure. Right, you guys talk about the dangers of bog bodies. Yes, you're completely right as well.
Yeah.
In Ireland, running around and stuff, it can be very dangerous to fall into bog and become a
Yeah.
bog body. Lucky for Rachel. Rachel, although it's actually very, very sad what happens to the people who just disappear from their communities and never reappear again. For
Yeah.
Rachel, thousands of years afterwards, it's absolutely brilliant. Why are bog bodies so great for yourself and your research, Rachel?
Yeah, bog bodies. It's like I shed a tear for them, and then I get really happy because the bogs in Northern Europe, Ireland, Denmark, Sweden, they preserve both human remains and textiles so well. So in general, when someone falls into a bog, but we kind of all think they were probably pushed into the bog, when they fall into a bog dead, the bog kind of gets sucked down into the bog, and the anaerobic environment of the bog retards decay. And there's no oxygen to help break things down. The microbial growth is basically completely retarded, if not stopped altogether. And so when they build things in Ireland is usually how they find these things. When they construct new construction in Ireland, they're digging, and usually someone on a backhoe has to stop because suddenly there's a body hanging from the backhoe that looks like it died last week. And then they have to call the police. This is the funny part. They have to call the police. They have to do a murder investigation, actually, on these bog bodies to make sure that they died long enough ago that the statute of limitations has run out. And so these bodies are wearing the garments in which they died. In many cases, the stitches are preserved. The color usually isn't, because of the chemicals and the natural chemicals in the bog usually turn it all brown. But and sometimes it even breaks down the original dye stuffs to the point where even analyzing the fibers won't tell us what it used to be. But at least we can see how these garments were made and put together. So bog bodies are a fashion historian's dream come true. Sad for the bog body, happy for us.
Yeah, it's a very funny relationship, all right. Right. I'm going to start. If you guys have any more questions coming in, definitely stay as we start to finish up, because I have to run off to Taiwan. I will finish up this one as well. I'm part Irish, part Cherokee. We have a huge, actually, where my wife lived for a good chunk of her time. I'm from Mallow, by the way, if anyone's wondering. My wife is from Middleton. There's actually a huge monument to the Native Americans in Middleton. The reason for it is because during the Great Hunger, when the British were starving us to death, the Native Americans actually intervened and tried to send money over to the Irish, which actually saved loads of Irish lives. And the Irish recently, in recent years, went and built a huge monument to the Native Americans in Middleton, where my wife lived for many years. So definitely look that up. Native American Monument in Middleton, if you're looking onto that one. Absolutely brilliant monument, and really brings the communities, the Irish and Native American communities together. So definitely look that one up for sure.
Yeah, and I think so. In the United States, when the Irish came over, especially after the Great Famine in the 19th century, the Irish, as pale as they were, the Irish were regarded by the Americans already there as being second or third class humans, and so there was a massive prejudice against them. No, Irish need not apply were signs you saw everywhere for jobs. And so the Irish, who ended up taking advantage of all of the homesteading land grabs, which is discussed in the movie Far and Away, by the way, the Irish who ended up doing that ended up, in the places where the Native Americans were living. And they actually, in a certain way, often ended up finding a kind of kinship with them, because they were both discriminated minorities, right? And so it was a very interesting relationship. And it still boggles my mind that these people who are as pale as the driven snow coming from Ireland could be looked at and be told, oh, well, you're not European enough for us. You're not, it's crazy, right? It's like, these people are as pale as you are. What are you on about? Yeah. Racism for the win, my friend. Beautiful stuff.
And just before we finish up as well, can you just describe your outfit as well, before we finish up?
Yes. So someone commented, wait, a drinking game? Yes. Here on the Creative Contessa, we're starting a whole official drinking game. I'm going to post the rules. We're still writing them down. But basically, there's certain series of questions, Philip, or comments that we always get about me, right? Are you Amish? Will you marry me? There was another one that people keep asking me, and I can't. Will you churn butter? So the new drinking game is going to be every time someone asks if I'm Irish, that you have to take a shot of your beverage of choice, preferably fermented, please. But of course, if you don't imbibe, that's fine as well. Pick a beverage that you like.
Nice.
So what am I? I'm not Amish. So not Amish. A couple of things. One, you see this beautiful replica 15th century gem? Definitely not Amish, because the Amish are super modest. Their whole thing is modesty. Exposed neckline, not modest. All this skin, if I were Amish, I would be wearing something that buttoned here and covered everything from my wrists to my neck, right? Also, really full, fancy dress with really full skirts dyed this vivid blue, not Amish. No, I am second half of the 15th century. I'm dressed as the sort of in the Lululemon casual wear of France, Flanders, and England in the second half of the 15th century. So not Amish.
Would there be any influences of that in Ireland during the late 15th century, or would there be no influence at all?
Yeah, so we have this gown, bog bodies, circling back to dead people in bogs. So in the County Moy, they found a bog body, a woman, and she was dressed in this dress that is now called the Moy gown. The dress was shockingly not in great shape. They didn't find, sorry, I apologize. I'm confused. I'm conflating two things. They didn't find a body. They found the remnants of this garment in Moy, in the bog. And they think it dates to the 14th or 15th century. And in terms, even though its construction is really complicated, it's got this crazy complex tailoring with all these pieces that come together, and it's got this really deep arm's eye. But when you see a reconstruction of the garment, the silhouette is very similar to this. So it seems that, yes, they had very, very similar garments in Ireland in the 14th and or 15th century. And it seems that if you look at the way the great Irish ladies are dressing in the 15th century, probably this was their underlayer, just like it should be for me as well. They should be wearing over top of this really great voluminous gown that's belted and has all these organ pleats in it, and it goes to the ground, and it's really fancy. Those are the great Irish ladies. Obviously, not every Clare was wearing that, walking around the bogs. But for certain that this style, this kind of general silhouette, seems to have been a thing that was present in Ireland. We also have a Bible. I've sent you pictures of this Bible, the Ballymote Bible, right? It dates to about 1403. And there's a depiction of Noah's Ark in the Ballymote Bible. And Ballymote is way up in the north, right? It's nowhere near the Pale. So it was clearly calligraphed and illuminated by Irish artists. This is not an imported book, right? It's the style of depiction is definitely not the professional illuminator workshops of Flanders, for instance. And this boat, it's a cog. It depicts a cog, or maybe even a carvel. I'm not good enough at boats to know the difference between those two, but it's clearly an early 15th century ship, like the same kind you see everywhere in Europe in the time. And the Noah's family are depicted as being a king, queen, and their children, because that's the early, that's the understanding, the medieval understanding of Noah, that to have been selected by God, obviously he must have been a king, right? And therefore his wife is a queen and their children are princes and princesses. And so they're depicted in fitted garments that are like the neckline is a little bit different. For the women, it's more of a boat neckline. And for the men, the neckline goes all the way up to the neck. But it is a fitted garment that buttons down the front for both the men and the women. And it also looks very much like the Moy gown.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can actually connect the 1403-ish Ballymote Bible illumination up in Ballymote with this gown that is found in Moy. So yeah, they very much seem to have had similar things, which I know, a lot of people don't want to hear, oh, well, people in Ireland were dressing in a similar fashion to the people in the other parts of Europe. but that's just how it was. That's how it seems to be.
Yeah.
Now, they weren't necessarily wearing all the layers. And that's where it gets a little fun. And this ties into St. Patrick's Purgatory. So have you ever been to St. Patrick's Purgatory? So this brings us back to St. Patrick for everyone who's here for a St. Patrick chat. Have you been there? I haven't.
Is it?
Yeah. I haven't been there myself. Have you been there?
No, I actually haven't gone up to St. Patrick's Purgatory up in the north.
Didn't you grow up in Ireland or something like that?
What's crazy is I was up in Armagh as well. Like, I literally next to it. But when you see, it's a bit funny in, what was it, the 90s Ireland, because it was a war kicking off, so I wasn't allowed to wander up there. But I actually have been up there a few times recently, but I haven't gone up to that specific area. So no, I haven't gone up to that spot. But I have been around there. Myself and Yuki did living history events up around there. And Yuki was like, oh, let's go. And I was like, we can go to that later because we had tons of other stuff to be doing.
And then later never came, right?
Yeah.
So St. Patrick's Purgatory, is it still a pilgrimage spot? I assume it must be, right?
There's still people going up there, or people just going up there for walks. So yeah, you still have
in the Middle Ages, St. Patrick's Purgatory was a very popular international pilgrimage destination. So St. Patrick wasn't just an Irish saint. He was a saint who was known all throughout Europe and revered. So I just want to make that clear. Yes, of course, the Irish really identify with him very hard these days, but in the Middle Ages, that wasn't the case. He wasn't just an Irish saint. He was regarded by everyone, and the St. Patrick's pilgrimage is apparently a cave that is at least now identified as the cave to which St. Patrick II was called, so that he could go and descend into a sort of purgatory and contemplate and come up with a better strategy for spreading the gospel, because according to the legend, he was having trouble converting people to Christianity. And so he retreated to this hermit-like cave and basically communed with God, and then emerged from his purgatory, basically, ready to go out and spread the message of Jesus and the love that is the Gospels, right? So St. Patrick's Purgatory by the 12th century had become a very popular pilgrimage destination. And so and this is a new resource that we can utilize to find out more about the way the Irish are dressing in any given time. Because when people would go on pilgrimage, sometimes they would write letters back home. Sometimes they would actually write entire travel vlogs in the Middle Ages. And so we actually have a travel vlog from a Catalan, an Iberian Viscount, who goes to St. Patrick's Purgatory at the end of the 14th century. And he writes about his whole journey. And because he's a Viscount, right, he's a pretty high-ranking nobleman, and Irish hospitality is pretty awesome anyway in this era. He's welcomed everywhere he goes, and he's put up and he's hosted. And he writes about his experiences in what I call the court of King O'Neill.
Yes.
The court of King O'Neill. It's his own language. That's how he understood the system of leaders and chieftains and whatnot in 14th century Ireland.
That word king could be quite funny at times, because as re or I, but there's also a whole clan system and stuff under it. At the time, he would have been, referred to as either Taoiseach, which means Taoiseach, or re, which would have been the equivalent of a local baron and stuff. So it can be quite funny with the language.
Right.
It's funny because the O'Neills did go for high kingship multiple times. And at the time, there's kind of a funny they kind of want to be equals now, because the O'Briens don't want to recognize the O'Neills as high kings. The O'Neills don't want to recognize the O'Briens as high kings. And so what they do instead is they kind of start giving each other gifts. So it's like, well, I don't recognize you as a high king, so I'm not going to give you cows, but I'm going to give you these horses, which are better because you need more horses for war, as a gift to recognize this confederation of us coming together, and also to, because you're going to need a gift and all that kind of stuff as well. So they're recognizing their relationship within a confederation of Irish, but they're not recognizing each other as high king. And it's kind of our evolution from kingship into becoming a republic. And I think somebody else was arguing that these influences make their way over to America as well, but that's out of my field of expertise. But it is interesting that we are starting to, because of O'Neill not being recognized as a high king, but as a kind of local king, as a local baron, we're starting to see this evolution into a republic.
Right. And so, to this Viscount from 14th century Catalonia, his understanding of hierarchy and leadership, he uses the term king, rey, in Catalan, right? Which is why it's important for us to understand that he's a foreigner. He doesn't understand the nuances of Irish politics in the 14th century or political systems. So that's just how he understood it, right? But he talks about O'Neill's court, and he says some interesting things. He's shocked by how underdressed they are.
Okay.
And the problem is that he uses words like naked, and then modern people see that word and they use their modern interpretation of nakedness. And so for most modern Westerners, anyway, Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Mexicans, we hear the word naked and we think, well, they're just wearing their skin, right? But that's not what he means by naked, because he talks about them being naked, but then he goes on to say, and they're wearing these tunics, but their legs are bare, and the women are naked. They're wearing nothing but a tunic and a cloak. And you're like, but that's not naked. So, but for him, they were underdressed. So I think the difference, one of the differences in 14th, 15th century Irish fashion versus, say, what the English are wearing or what the French are wearing, if we're getting Irish, not Cork, not Waterford, not Limerick, not the cities that have this more international influence. We're getting up into Gaelic, the Gaelic Irish, right? I think one of the big differences isn't the silhouette, the shape of the garments. I think it's how many layers people were wearing.
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to. I think in the mind of this Viscount's name is Ramon de Perellos. In this Viscount's mind, they're not wearing enough clothing for their station, right? They're dressed at the level of a servant or a peasant or a carter or a driver. They're not dressed at the level of royalty. And so for him, they're all naked, but they weren't really.
The conversation in the comment section has gotten quite interesting on the definitions of wizards and witches and all that kind of stuff. What's the story, right? Before we go too wild in the comment section, because some of you guys are talking about white magic and dark magic and stuff. What's white magic? Before we start, what is white magic? What's dark magic? What's going on with that stuff before we get into the deeper conversation of wizards and witches and all that kind of stuff?
Well, So Nevis, you're out there, right? So people who would like to learn more about medieval magic and medieval astrology, on Saturday morning, Asia, Friday night, America's, middle of the night, Europe, Africa, I have a guest coming on, Nevis, who's really knowledgeable on this topic. And we're going to be specifically talking about magic and astrology in the Middle Ages.
Nice.
So for my part, I have not seen the term, and I'm going to say my focus on this kind of level of research is mostly 15th century. I have not seen the term white magic or black magic in the 15th century. Nevis is out there. He's still out there in the credits. He can absolutely, there he is. Look, oh my God, LMAO. Yeah, right. I have not personally seen the terms black magic or white magic. But was the question, are there wizards and witches in the Middle Ages or something like that?
They're starting to jump over to they started off with someone accusing you of being a witch, and then
drink. Everyone drink. That's one of them. Part of the Creative Contessa drinking game is anytime someone says, "Are you a witch?" Take a shot.
I already ran out of water, so I don't have any water on
me. Clearly, you need some whiskey, my friend. Yuki.
The house is empty. Because we're going up to Taiwan, so the house is empty of food and water right now. So I'm here dying. What was it called? Yeah, it's interesting on my side of things, maybe more in the field of expertise for Ireland, which in itself is funny because it's outside of my field of expertise for studying magic, is we do actually have the term white woman inside of Ireland, but it gets a
Right.
bit funny from, was it 1320 onwards, because you have Ellis Kettler in Kilkenny, which according to the English clergy, she's a witch. Oh, she's a witch. So it does get quite complicated from that point onwards, especially with the words that they are using. Although she is branded a heretic, if you read the description for her, it sounds very much in the language of what you would rather see in was the 16th and 17th century. So she
Right.
is a bit strange in the language that they use against her. Although technically speaking, she is burned as a heretic, not as a witch, technically speaking, but it
Right.
is quite
Yeah.
complicated. It's also funny as well, the relationship with the word wizard. I am aware of it being used in the Holy Roman Empire, but when it comes down to Ireland, you start to see it with the Fitzgeralds as well, where locals refer to him as the wizard Fitzgerald and stuff.
Right.
Which and this is in the 16th century.
I'm
And I do,
assuming it's because he was an alchemist, right? He was into
yeah,
alchemy,
I
right?
was quite
Yeah.
curious about that as well, because he spent a lot of
Yeah.
time hanging around with the Italians. If you don't forget, we have a book. Oh, I have it in front of me here. Oh, give us 1 second. I'll drag that over. Here's the book. Absolutely amazing book. It is The Geraldines and Medieval Ireland: The Making of the Myth. And in it has the quotations and stuff where one day in 1403, the Fitzgeralds go into the Irish Parliament and they declare that they are no longer of French descent, of Norman descent. In fact, they were Italian, and they were always Italian. And they are related to, what's the pronunciations of the family that they relate to again, Rachel? The
Oh,
Geraldinis? Or?
the Gherardini, the
Geraldinis, that's the one.
Gherardini, not Gerald,
Ger-
Gherardini, like
oh.
Mona Lisa, Gherardini.
Because they're related. She went on to the Mona
She
Lisa as
married,
well.
she married into the Gherardini family.
Oh, is that the mix? Because a lot of
Hmm.
people are like, "Oh, does that mean that they're related into the painting of Mona Lisa and all that stuff?" So it's a marriage alliance.
Yeah, it's a marriage alliance. She marries. So I mean, she marries into the Gherardini, and so she's identified as Mona Lisa Gherardini, but she's not of that blood. She marries into that
Okay.
family.
But we still have a link from Ireland, allegedly a link from Ireland
Right.
to Italy. No, I think they're telling the truth, Rachel. I don't think this is something they just made up in
No, I
1403 to the
agree.
Irish
I
Parliament.
agree. Total fact. Total
Yes,
fact. Real
yes, yes.
news. Real
Yes.
news.
They don't have Norman descent. I love how they argue as well. They just happen to be in Normandy in 1066. There is no proof or evidence of them being from Normandy. They just
Yeah.
so happen to be there. They were called on because of the relationship the Normans had with the Sicilians. They went over to, what was it, France, fought in 1066, then went to Wales, married as Italians, married local Welsh women, and then
Right.
went into Ireland. Okay.
100%.
Yes.
Totally
Yes.
natural evolution of a family.
Yes.
Totally natural
Yes. Of
trajectory.
course. So that's how, what was it? So they end up in 1403. They announce to the Irish Parliament that they are rightfully Italian, and then they build up a relationship with Floridinis. So at the time, around the late 16th century, you have one of the Geraldinis referred to as the wizard Fitzgerald by the locals. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
probably right. He probably was playing with the old alchemy at the time.
Yeah. The problem is that English in some ways has a more nuanced set of vocabulary modernly for those sorts of concepts. Is there a difference between a witch, a warlock, and a wizard and a sorcerer?
Yeah.
Right. And other languages don't necessarily have those distinctions. So, you were talking about the Holy Roman Empire. In the Middle Ages, the word, as far as I know, is Zauberer, which is also the word for magician. So,
Yeah.
and also magician, yet another word,
Oh.
right? So, it's sometimes it can be hard to identify what exactly these people are being accused of. For the most part, the question of was the question whether there were witches and wizards in the Middle Ages, or whether they were brought up for, what was the actual question?
Most of it was arguments, kind of died down now,
Oh,
but most of it
I
was
see.
just
Okay. Yeah,
arguing
right.
who was a witch, what was a witch.
Right.
So it was all just.
It's, magic, as Nevis is going to tell us on during our weekend medieval sewing party, where we talk about magic and astrology. There wasn't as much of an antipathetic relationship between the church and magic and the practice of magic as people think there was. That level of antipathy is actually a post-Reformation or a Reformation development, and it's not a medieval development at all. So for the most part, anytime someone is accused of witchcraft or sorcery, it's because they've pissed off someone wrong in the political structure, and that's the excuse to confiscate their property and get them out of. That's why they're generally, when they are convicted, as you noted, it's not witchcraft or wizardry or sorcery. What is it? It's heresy, right? They're convicted of heresy. So
yes.
It's always heresy. The Knights Templar were completely destroyed in one fell swoop by being convicted of witchcraft. All men, all men, and all at once. That's the origin of Black Friday. And it was this massive European conspiracy. And it was all because they had gotten too rich and too powerful. And, the French king and the Pope basically wanted what they had. They wanted their power, they wanted their money, they wanted their land. They owned so many properties because they were like the bankers of Europe at that time. So, they weren't actually practicing witchcraft, obviously, but it was a fun tool to have in your political arsenal. But it was mostly only the very powerful who got accused of it. It wasn't, everyone talks about, oh, poor women who were different or smart, they got burnt at the stake for witchcraft in the Middle Ages. They did not. That's a myth. That did not happen. Yeah. Did I see another person accuse me of? Oh, they accuse me of being a Quaker.
It's my thing back.
I'm not a Quaker. Also not a Quaker.
Oh, Jesus. We're going on all night about this.
Wait, there was...
Start finishing
there was a comment.
We had it.
I can't get to it. I can't reach the screen. Damn it. Okay, hold on. I'm tied to my loops.
Oh, no.
Can you give a brief on what you specialize in, what you are recreating? A drink. I do medieval living history, and right now I am depicting a 15th century French noblewoman, noblewoman in the Burgundian court anyway. And I'm wearing my 15th century Lululemon ensemble and engaging in a craft in that aristocratic women engaged in called finger loop braiding. Back then it was called lace making. And what will it be used for, Philip? These ties that I'm making, these cords.
Oh, you're making those loops to tie your husband's armor together for later on when he's off fighting and gillivanting and so on and so forth.
Exactly, when he's engaging in knight errantry, so that his armor stays on his person. I'm making all the cords that will tie his armor to his clothing, basically. Yeah.
Oh, aye. Right, we'll start finishing up now, shall we?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody who came on today. It meant so much to myself and Rachel and everybody that wished us a happy St. Patrick's Day. It means a ton to us. If you guys want more of this, and obviously covering some good old Irish classes, I do Irish medieval classes, and I will be next week, Sunday? On the 22nd, I will be giving classes on the 9th of the 22nd, Irish time, 9 p.m. I think over New York, it is around 11, 12 o'clock. No, sorry, about 4, 5 o'clock. Sorry, 4 or 5 o'clock New York time.
I don't know. Has Ireland already changed back an hour?
No.
Fuck me.
Yeah, we had this argument. Not yet. Not yet. It's funny.
So hard.
I don't know.
It's so hard.
Yeah, it's so funny. I don't know what the story is, but anyway, regardless, on Sunday night, if you head on over to my Patreon, I do classes over there, about 20 quid a month. Definitely well worth it. This week we'll be covering Irish architecture during the 13th century. With the arrival of the Old French, we start to see, well, we already had Romanesque even before the Old French Knights come into Ireland, but they bring in the old Gothic styles into Ireland as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, they
And so I'll
do.
be covering the development of castles, from wooden castles to stone castles. Good examples being Trim Castle, Limerick Castle, etc. And we'll also be covering cathedrals like in Kilkenny with a huge French, what was it called, influence coming in. William Marshall. If you ever wonder what happened to all William Marshall's money, have a good look at Kilkenny Cathedral, all invested in and constructed by Elizabeth, what was it? Elizabeth de Clare and also William Marshall. We'll be talking about that on Sunday night over on my Patreon. So definitely pay attention to that one. Also, if you guys want to support our research into the likes of the kilts during the 15th century, which Rachel will be waffling on about some more, and also the likes of tartans and all that kind of stuff, if you want to support our research into that, definitely head on over to our GoFundMe at Help Recreate a 15th Century Ensemble. Okay, so help recreate a 15th century Irish ensemble over on GoFundMe.
Yeah.
Okay, Rachel, you have some
Oh
plans
yeah,
this
yeah, we
week.
do.
What's your plans for this
We've
week?
got some things going on. So for those who
Mhm.
are just finding us, I am Philip and I are both reenactors. I am fascinated by all of history, honestly, and material culture in particular. How people live their daily lives really interests me a lot. So I do, through experimental archaeology, I try to recreate arts and crafts, toiletries, daily life from. I'm focused mostly these days on the 15th century.
Mm.
And what you see me now in is 15th century, basically 15th century Burgundian. And some of you keep saying, "Where's her shepherd's crook?" That may actually be the most accurate identification of this ensemble that I've ever seen in the comments. Because in fact, 15th century shepherdesses did absolutely dress just like this.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
so that's actually not completely inaccurate. Modern shepherdesses, no, no, they just wear like, you know, rubber boots and jeans and sweaters and stuff. But
Mm.
15th century shepherdess, 100%. Apparently, I need to add a crook to my a shepherd's medieval shepherd's crook to my collection. Um,
Aye.
yeah, right. um, anyway, shepherd's hooks are absolutely period. They are. They just didn't look quite the same as what many people think they did. Do you know what shepherd's crooks were used for? I actually found this out by watching Tudor Monastery Farm. Do you know
No,
what?
I know.
Why?
What are they used for? Just hooking the sheep back, was it?
No, not just that.
Oh.
So the original ones actually are shaped on the end in such a way that they can actually put rocks in them and sling the rocks, not at the sheep, but kind of near the sheep, so it startles them along.
Ah,
Yeah.
right. Now that
So it's
gets me thinking. Go
Yeah, so
on.
you're not actually going to hit the sheep. No one worry, we're not abusing sheep. It's just,
Mm.
the throwing a rock kind of in their general vicinity. And this is especially for sheep who get like off the trail, right? For the
Yeah.
sheep who wander into the woods, you need to kind of try to startle them back, say before they get too close to a cliff edge. Then they
Mm.
can actually put a rock in the end at the slung end of their crook and launch it like lacrosse.
Mm.
And it'll startle the sheep back in another direction. So it wasn't just hooking, crooking the sheep off of cliff edges. That was part of
Mm.
it, but not the entire thing.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And
So
just
yeah.
before we finish up as well, I'll let you do your thing for your class in a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
People were asking about the Knights Templars. Yes, actually, this is actually quite funny. Because the Knights Templars actually allowed native Gaelic people to join their ranks, when the Knights Templars were being hunted down in Europe, there were ones that were actually stationed in Dublin. And actually, a lot of Knights Templars, when they were suddenly put up on trial and stuff, the Knights Hospitallers kind of gave them the heads up, going, "Oh, fucking run away, quick. The English are after you." So a lot of them actually ran into the O'Donnell territory. So a lot of Knights Templars actually joined the O'Donnell McDonald's. And you're right as well. Did the Knights Templars fight on the side of the Scottish and the Irish at the Battle of Bannockburn? Yes, actually, we do have records of Knights Templars fighting on the side of the Scottish and the Irish against the English, because the English were hunting them down for the old, what's it called?
Yeah,
Trials
their
and stuff in
money,
Europe.
for their money, for their
Yeah.
resources, right? They wanted them gone, gone.
Yes, and that's why
Yeah.
there's a huge conspiracy now that the what was it called? What was the thing with the Da Vinci Code and all that kind of stuff? That the
Yeah,
all that kind of
yeah,
stuff is hidden in Scotland after the
right.
Battle of Bannockburn and stuff. So yeah, you're right. There's a whole conspiracy and everything to do with that. So you were saying earlier as well is that you're doing live streams as well on witches and wizards and all that kind of stuff. Can you
Yeah,
go into
yeah.
more detail about that?
Yeah, so if you're interested, I have a fantastic friend and loyal supporter, Nevis, who has a beautiful mind, and his particular area of expertise is the historical practice of magic and astrology. And I know many of us have a great many questions about medieval magic and astrology. So I will have him on my medieval sewing party this weekend, Saturday morning, Asia at 10 a.m. 9 p.m. New York City time, and whatever time that is in between there for all of you in the rest of the world. And we have a structured presentation we've prepared, or a structured basically kind of lecture, but it's going to also have a Q&A format, so you can come and ask your questions and learn all about medieval magic and astrology. I will also be learning a great deal, because this is not my area of expertise. But actually, it wouldn't necessarily have been my manner of expertise as a noblewoman in the 15th century. I probably wouldn't have known a whole lot about it. I would have had a peripheral knowledge, but that's why we had astrologers that we paid to do this stuff, right? There were court astrologers, there were court magicians, even though we wouldn't necessarily call them that now. And their job was to try to predict the auspicious time to engage in a variety of activities, right? So I will be learning a great deal myself, and I'm very excited to share that with you all. So please come on Friday night, Saturday morning, middle of the night, depending on where you are, with all of your questions about medieval magic and astrology. And I think it's going to be a really good time. Yeah, but otherwise, for those of you who are interested in supporting my medieval material culture research and recreation work, you can support me on Patreon. You can become a channel member on YouTube. You can become a Facebook subscriber if you like. And that comes with a whole host of access to extra content, tutorials on a variety of medieval crafts and dance, uncut footage from getting dressed recordings where my lady in waiting and I are just bantering. All sorts of extra resources. I have a Creative Contessa Discord server that's just for my patrons, my channel members, and my Facebook subscribers, where we share more resources, we discuss information, we talk about our projects. And and also I'd like to thank all of you who've given us super chats today, who've given us all those little gems that that YouTube offers. We appreciate you all just being part of our community in any way that you manage to do it. Yeah.
Happy days. Other than that, guys, thank you so much, and slán go bhfuil. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, guys, if you had any questions and we didn't answer them, we weren't necessarily ignoring you unless you were one of the assholes. Pop those questions in the comments under the video once it posts, and Philip and I will endeavor to answer them for you. Okay, everyone, until next time, stay creative. Good night.
Bye. 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 Bye.